Let's pick up on that in our Stocks to Watch this morning. Bloomberg Stocks editor Sam Unstead joining us here in our London studio. So Sam, as Naira mentioned there, oil stocks might get a bit of a boost. They certainly seem to have at the moment. There's been quite a bit of movement after Iraq saying, very much against the consensus, it reckons OPEC Plus will consider more output cuts. What's happening?
Yes, indeed. So they do appear to be getting a bit of a boost, but not a particularly big one. And as you were kind of saying, it's a question of whether the market believes that this is really the case or not. You know, every other voice coming out of OPEC Plus is saying that this isn't going to happen. We also had data out this morning from Russia showing that they are still overshooting their production targets under the OPEC Plus deal. So it seems as though the market isn't quite believing it, but it's giving a little credence to it because the shares are all higher this morning. Worth noting, of course, though, on Friday that crude oil did drop a lot because of this exact story that OPEC Plus was not considering these cuts.
Now, of course, Hong Kong, we again saw some protests over the weekend, not very big ones, but some, and they've been exposed. There's been a warning on GDP, retail sales coming out, and Hong Kong is saying, hang on, this is not going to be good.
Yeah, the preview for the retail sales is extremely negative, so that's really the thing to watch as we go in. So this is more of one to watch for. In fact, I think it's about 25 minutes' time the Hong Kong retail sales will come out, especially for luxury stocks. So they're underperforming a little bit this morning, or a few of them are underperforming a little bit this morning. I would wait and see what happens at 8:30, because if that number is particularly bad, and the indications from Hong Kong's financial secretary are that they're going to be very bad, it may well be that luxury stocks take a bit of a hit on that. At the moment, underperforming a little bit. So one of the major Hong Kong exposed ones, Swatch, for example, is down this morning. Burberry is down this morning, but only by a little bit. So wait until 8:30 and we'll see what happens then.
All right. And finally, Ted Baker. Now, that's a company that's had issues over the last 6 months to a year, but the former high-flying UK clothing retailer, another hit.
Yeah, so Ted Baker, they've dropped as much as 14% at the open this morning. It's worth bearing in mind they were already down 74% going into the session today. They've had a string of bad news, starting with the allegations around the conduct of their founder, who stepped down earlier in the year. They've also missed sales estimates. They've had a couple of warnings over the course of the year. It's been a pretty terrible year for Ted Baker. So they're going to be now much closer to the bottom of that FTSE All-Share Index, which they were already a laggard on.
All right, Sam, thanks very much indeed. That was Bloomberg Stocks editor Sam Unstead.
On to our top stories, and China's Caixin PMI came in better than expected for November. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia's Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
The Caixin Manufacturing Index rose to 51.8 from October's 51.7. Bloomberg Economics says the gains, though, might be ephemeral. Gains in unemployment offset weakness in supply and demand side. The official PMI jumped over 50 for the first time since April. Even there, Bloomberg Economics says it's more a let-up in the declines rather than an end of the downturn. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now, China is sanctioning several U.S. non-government organizations, including Human Rights Watch, for their behaviors during the Hong Kong protest. That's according to China Central Television. In the report, Beijing also reiterates the U.S. must stop meddling in Hong Kong affairs, vows to take further actions if necessary. Over the weekend, China also said it wants tariffs rolled back before any trade deal can be agreed with the US. Global Times newspaper tweeted that a US pledge to scrap new levies planned this month cannot replace the lifting of existing measures.
Turning to Germany, where Chancellor Angela Merkel's government has been thrown into crisis. This after the Social Democrats elected a new leadership that may take down her ruling coalition. Bloomberg's Patrick Donoghue reports.
SPD members chose two left-wing politicians, Norbert Walter Borjans and Saskia Esken, who have been vocal in their criticism of the party's coalition with Merkel. While the two have promised not to quit the government abruptly, they may lay out conditions that Merkel's Christian Democrats won't be able to stomach. That could bring Merkel's fourth-term government to an end. It all depends on what is decided at the SPD party conference in Berlin next weekend. In Berlin, Patrick Donoghue, Bloomberg Daybreak, Europe.
Now, ECB President Christine Lagarde is going to offer her first European Parliament testimony later today. The focus is going to be probably on her plans for the biggest reassessment of the institution's mission in 16 years, with a strategic review due to be announced within weeks. Lagarde signalled that the review will probably include climate change as well as inflation, financial stability and communication. And there appears to be a growing debate about whether the ECB's inflation goal is set at the right level.
Now, oil's rebounding from its biggest weekly loss since October and a 5% drop on Friday for WTI, as Iraq has signalled that OPEC Plus will consider deeper output cuts at its meeting this week. More from Bloomberg's Susanna Palmer.
Iraq says OPEC and its allies will consider deeper production cuts. The country's oil minister is telling reporters in Baghdad this could be a cut of about 400,000 barrels a day. He also noted Iraq complied with its commitment to lowering output in November. OPEC Plus had been widely signaling reluctance to cut more, but Iraq is in the throes of political turmoil. OPEC Plus is set to meet in Vienna this week. Susanna Palmer, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now, Nissan's new leader takes control of the company today. Makoto Yoshida has been speaking at a press conference in the last half hour, just now, in fact, saying that the Nissan takes disruption over the past year very seriously. He says the Nissan alliance has been part of Nissan's growth, and that they are that he's giving the lines basically for the direction of the company in the coming year.
Yeah, also commenting that incentive-based sales have hurt the brand and profitability. Those are your top stories. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with the World News. Leanne.
Good morning, Naira. Let's start here in the UK. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is painting his party as one of law and order. That's after the terror attack in London that killed 2 people. It's cast a shadow over the election campaign. Opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn is blaming a decade of spending cuts to prisons. Johnson is blaming the previous Labour government's criminal justice legislation.
What I have said since coming to office in the last 3 or 4 months is that I think this whole system of automatic early release, which was brought in by Labour, it was under that system.
You've been in power for 10
years.
It was
under that system. I've only been in office for 120 days.
That was Prime Minister Boris Johnson speaking to the BBC's Andrew Marr there. Malta's Prime Minister Joseph Muscat has announced he will resign next month amid mounting pressure over the death of a journalist back in 2017. Bloomberg's John Verlaine has this report on corruption on the island.
Muscat said he'll stay in office until his Labour Party elects a new leader and Prime Minister. The Premier has been struggling to put behind him allegations of a political cover-up over the 2017 killing of Daphne Caruana Galizia, who reported extensively on corruption on the island. In Rome, John Verlaine, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now to the US. President Trump is declining to take part in the House impeachment hearing this Wednesday, but he's keeping open the possibility of testifying at a later session. The president's lawyer saying the whole process has been unfair to the president, adding the hearing was scheduled, quote, no doubt purposely, while Trump is at the NATO meeting that's here in London. And in Hong Kong, demonstrators have returned to the streets. Police fired tear gas as thousands of protesters marched in Hong Kong's tourist district on Sunday. That's as tensions re-emerged after the euphoria of pro-democracy victories at the district council elections last weekend. Protesters also marched to the US consulate to express gratitude after President Trump signed legislation last week expressing support for the demonstrators. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Leanne, thank you for that. Now, still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, China's factory outlook brightens, but stocks turn lower as Beijing threatens sanctions on US NGOs over what it calls meddling in Hong Kong affairs. We'll get the latest on that and what it might mean, of course, for the US-China trade talks. That's coming up next from Hong Kong here on Daybreak Europe.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Something remarkable happens when just the right elements come together. Ideas with technology, data with inspiration, investors with solutions. This is what Invesco does every day, because they believe the possibilities of life and investing are greater when we come together. Invesco. Let's invest in greater possibilities together. To learn more, visit Invesco.com/together. Invesco Distributors, Incorporated.
You know your body, and you know when something's off, when something doesn't feel quite right. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, rashes, and fever. They could be signs of lupus. Listen to your body. Take care of yourself. We're here to help you take control of your health. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Francine Lacroix on Bloomberg Surveillance.
Five Guys is a U.S. restaurant with around 100 stores in the U.K. and big expansion plans. That's despite Brexit uncertainty and difficult market conditions. Well, to talk about all of that and much more, I'm joined by the Five Guys UK Chief Executive, John Uckbert. John, do you ever worry about overexpansion? Do you worry about Brexit impacting your business?
Well, I mean, at this point, it's early days still. We have just opening our 100th store at St. Paul's next week, Monday, and we still think there's actually a lot to go. We think we may be halfway there here in the UK. So it feels like early days for the premium burger segment here in the UK. Of course, Five Guys was founded 30 years ago in America, so there's we're only 6 years in here, so I think it feels like there's a long way to go.
Do you worry about inflation in the UK and the costs that means for actually the things you buy, your food produce?
Sure. Well, cost of goods is a major part of our business, of course, and actually one of the biggest impacts has been the pound versus other currencies. And if you're buying product in non-pound currency and you're earning money in pounds, then of course you have a foreign exchange challenge in addition to inflation associated with it. So both from a currency perspective and from a product inflation perspective, you got to be aware of both.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Roger Hearing with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash, and we're getting some data coming across the screen in the last few moments. Spain's November manufacturing PMI rises to 47.5. The forecast was 46.5, so a beat on that. And in fact, there's an optimism across the markets this morning, following, of course, a pretty optimistic session in Asia. At the moment, Stock 600 up 0.3%, FTSE 100 up 0.4%, the CAC up 0.4%, and the DAX up 0.3%. A lot of that perhaps following that better than expected PMI data out of China that came through, and suggestions perhaps of changes in the global economy, perhaps the global economy turning the corner. Looking ahead to the US Open, S&P, E-minis, Dow, and Nasdaq all hovering around the up 0.3% mark at the moment. Earlier, MSCI Asia Pacific finished up 0.4%, so a lot of green on the screen. The other interesting mover at the moment is oil, perhaps reflecting that suggestion by the Iraqis that there might be more output cuts coming at the OPEC meeting this week in Vienna, OPEC Plus. But in fact, there's a lot of sentiment that won't happen. However, WTI up is $55.99 the barrel. That's up 1.5% at the moment. Brent crude $61.16 the barrel, up 1.12%. And in the bond markets at the moment, US 10-year Treasury benchmark up 6 basis points at the moment, 1.84. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more on what's going on around the world. Leanne.
Roger, good morning. A vigil will be held this morning to pay tribute to those affected by the London Bridge terror attack. 23-year-old Saskia Jones and 25-year-old Jack Merritt were both killed by Usman Khan on Friday afternoon. The convicted terrorist had been attending a conference on prisoner rehabilitation hosted by the Cambridge University scheme Learning Together. Bank of England Governor Mark Carney has accepted a new job. After leaving Threadneedle Street, he'll become UN Special Envoy for Climate Action and Finance. His new pay packet, just $1 a year. Carney is due to leave his current job on January the 31st, but his successor hasn't yet been named. It's boosted speculation he may be asked to extend his term. And finally, did you hear that loud bang across London? 9 nothing to worry about, just a sonic boom after military planes were scrambled to investigate an aircraft that had temporarily lost communication. That's according to the UK Ministry of Defence. Hundreds of residents reported that sound around 4:20 yesterday morning. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok and Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you. I'm the deepest sleeper in the world. Nothing wakes me up ever.
I
No.
was
Apart
saying
from my alarm at 3 a.m.
Yeah,
somehow,
yes.
magically.
And coming in working here wakes you up reasonably.
I was just saying that I heard it. I never jumped out of my bed so quickly. It was crazy. I didn't know what it was, but there we are. We all know now.
Yes, thank you so much, Leanne Gerrans with the World News. Now, China has sanctioned several US non-government organizations, including Human Rights Watch, for their behaviors during the Hong Kong protests, according to China Central Television. In the report, China reiterates that Washington must stop meddling in Hong Kong affairs and vows to take further actions if necessary. For more, let's bring in Bloomberg's editor for Greater China Economics, Jeff Black. Jeff, we'll certainly discuss the economics in a moment with the data that we had over the weekend and signals from the PBOC and Yigong. But first of all, on these latest developments, how should we interpret these as we have been waiting to find out what sort of retaliation we might get from China after the signing of the Hong Kong bill?
Yeah, well, these responses look, on the face of it, very targeted and fairly moderate, although the people that they're targeted against might not say that, and it might stop a few US warships from harboring in Hong Kong. But what it doesn't do, of course, is something that brings it across into the trade negotiations. It doesn't ask for any further concessions from the US on trade. It doesn't walk away from the table altogether. So it looks like the Phase 1 deal is still on track. At least it hasn't been derailed by this particular incident.
Now, Jeff, what about the data that's come out, the Caixin and the ordinary PMI, and the suggestion from it of a bit of a rebound? Is it just perhaps a glitch? Is there something more significant than that, do you think?
Only time will tell us that. We are being pretty cautious with this data. Before it came out, all the signs were pointing towards a continued slowdown, and there's plenty of reasons to believe in that slowdown. Certainly on a larger structural level, it is pretty much still there. We've still got deflation at the factory gate. That hurts profitability at manufacturing companies. That's a fairly serious and long embedded trend by now over the past year. However, better demand from the global economy and feeding through into the private sector in China, that is an upside sign, and if it continues, it will be good news. It will point to stabilization, and that's what everybody's looking for.
Yeah, and in the meantime, of course, we heard from Yigong of the PBOC that policymakers will continue to refrain from large-scale easing steps. You mentioned the factory gate deflation, Jeff. To what extent does the prospect of consumer inflation potentially hitting 5% in January, as some analysts are saying, complicate the picture of stimulus from the PBOC if the longer trend is deflationary?
It is a complicated picture already. The CPI, the food price-driven consumer inflation, certainly gives pause for thought. If growth, however, if the economy looked like it was really slowing rapidly, and the overall stabilization of the economy was at risk, then we would probably see the PBOC prioritize growth over short-term consumer inflation. At the moment, it's still a fairly balanced picture, so they can choose a little bit between the two, sit on the fence, target some stimulus here and there, but not really have to go forcefully in either direction.
And briefly, will this ease a little bit, this kind of data, ease the pressure on the Chinese to do a quick deal with the US, perhaps to their disadvantage?
We've always been a little bit skeptical as to whether or not the economic developments in China really play much of a role in the negotiations. Certainly the short-term ones don't. We believe that the Chinese are certainly looking long-term, and they're trying to secure long-term agreement with the US. The ups and downs of the economy probably don't play into that too much.
Great to have you with us. Bloomberg's editor for Greater China Economics, Jeff Black. Thank you so much. And given what we've been talking about and the better-than-expected data, we are seeing a fair amount of risk on in markets today. To kick off December, the Stock 600 up 0.4%. US futures pointing higher. We saw green on the screen in Asia. The 10-year Treasury yield up 7 basis points now, touching a 185 handle. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Today is Cyber Monday, the final day of the 5-day Black Friday weekend, and investors and analysts will be keeping a close eye on the results after a strong Black Friday in stores and what Adobe Analytics is calling record Black Friday sales online. Bloomberg opinion retail columnist Sarah Halzak says the season's results can reverberate with consumers long after the holiday has passed.
If you're not showing them when they come into your store or pull up your website that you have good merchandise, that you have good pricing, that you're sort of aspirational and inspirational, that kind of sets a tone that will stick with that consumer for the rest of the year.
The calendar has compressed this holiday shopping season into just 26 days, with Thanksgiving having come out on the latest possible date. On the earnings calendar this week, we'll see quarterly results from Salesforce.com, Campbell's Soup, and H&R Block, as well as retailers including Land's End, Five Below, Children's Place, Tiffany, Dollar General, and Ulta Beauty. Mark Mills, Bloomberg Radio.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
IBKR is the professional's gateway to the world's markets. The IBKR Pro account plan offers investors enhanced price execution, our lowest margin loan rates, and highest interest paid on idle cash balances, and access to our powerful trader workstation, web, mobile, and API trading platforms. In addition, the IBKR Pro account plan offers low-cost access to stocks, options, futures, forex, fixed income, and more on over 125 markets in 31 countries. Learn more or open an IBKR Pro account at IBKR.com.
There are plenty of parties over the festive period. They'll have food and drink, music too. Some will even have rides and fireworks. But one has all that, plus a big something extra. Big Game 12 is London's biggest rugby party. To watch Harlequins take on Leicester Tigers from just £17 a ticket for children and £27 for adults, go to tickets.quins.co.uk or search Big Game 12. Kick-off 4:30pm, Saturday 28th of December, Twickenham Stadium.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery is running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We hunt in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
On 3, our unlimited data is actually unlimited, like for reals. That means you can scroll and scroll and scroll through all the Black Friday deals.
Because we have no speed limits, no data caps, and you'll be 5G ready at no extra cost.
Wow, so many savings.
Our Black Friday deals are now on. Save up to £480. Switch to 3, in-store or online. See 3.co.uk/unlimited-data. Savings on selected phones on 24-month contracts. Ends 5th of December. Terms apply.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Along the goal line, Martin scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Gonna move, hit a shot, he scores!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
The swagger of a perfect dunk. The rush of a three made from all the way downtown. The adrenaline surge of great defense. Can you feel the goosebumps yet? There's nothing like live NBA and nothing like listening live on TuneIn.
Giannis down the lane to the rim, throwing right corner three, another one.
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season, so you can be there when it matters most. Never miss the action as it happens. Hear the ball you love. Hear it live on TuneIn. Search NBA today to start listening.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB Digital Radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chahich.
And I'm Roger Hearing. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
30 minutes into the equity market open, where risk on in Europe up almost 0.5% on the Stock 600. Across regional benchmarks, the FTSE 100 higher by more than 0.5%. Same for the CAC 40. The DAX higher by almost 0.5%. IBEX and FTSE MIB lag slightly, but still firmly in the green, up 0.2%. This after 3 months of gains for global equities. US futures also on the front foot, extending gains. S&P, Nasdaq and Dow futures all higher by at least 0.3%. We did see a little bit of weakness on Friday, both in European equities and in the S&P 500, which dropped 0.4%. Its biggest drop in about 2 months. But guess what? It's been higher for 7 out of the past 8 weeks. So the optimism continues into December. It also does it in the bond markets, because the 10-year Treasury yield is up almost 8 basis points. We're above a 185 handle on that now. The 10-year Bund yield up 6 basis points at negative 29. 10-year gilt yield higher by 6 basis points at 76 basis points. And a lot of this optimism seeming to be driven by the better than expected data that we had out of China. It's also impacting the yen, which is retreating slightly against the dollar. Questions over whether there should be that much optimism over the data, which we'll get into in a moment. In oil as well, we're seeing a rebound after the worst week since October. WTI dropping 5% on Friday. WTI now trading at 56.13, up 1.7%. Brent at 61.37, up 1.5%. General optimism feeding into that, but also some comments from Iraq around the OPEC Plus meeting, Roger.
Okay, let's bring you a red head that's come across the terminal. We're waiting, of course, for the Hong Kong October retail sales value. We were warned they might be horrible, and in fact they are. Down 24.3% year on year. The estimate was down 22.6%. So the gloom, I think, and pessimism very much borne out by those figures. But let's move on to our top stories. China appears to be striking back at the US. Beijing is freezing port visits by US warships. It's also going to sanction some non-governmental organizations. That's after threatening to retaliate for President Trump's decision to sign the bill backing Hong Kong protesters.
Meanwhile, the reason for a lot of the risk on China's official manufacturing PMI has risen to 50.2 in the first expansion since April. The private Caixin manufacturing PMI also rose more than expected to its highest level on record. But Bloomberg's China correspondent Tom McKenzie says don't start celebrating just yet.
You know, large jumps in activity aren't unusual following China's week-long holidays, such as the Chinese New Year and the October holiday. And if you look at the output component, it rose sharply. But that was helped by more working days in October and milder than usual weather for this time of year. Now, Bloomberg Economics says, given all of this, we are still likely to see another 0.5 percentage point cut in the one-year rate by the end of the year and more cuts in 2020.
It's actually that we are seeing so much risk on, given what Tom has just said. So if you're kind of betting on a bottoming out in China or significant improvement, is the risk on really justified to the extent today? But if it's actually risk on because you're betting on more stimulus, well, you had the PBOC signaling that policy is going to stay cautious, saying they're going to refrain from large-scale easing steps. Not only that, but the prospect for CPI, a lot of analysts see that rising to 5% in January, Roger, which would further complicate the picture for stimulus from the PBOC as well.
Egang definitely talking about a long to mid-term or mid to long-term race rather than anything shorter term. Meanwhile, the German government faces crisis after its coalition partner elected a new leader who's seen as a threat to Chancellor Merkel. Her own choice to head the Social Democrats was soundly defeated by two politicians seen as fierce critics of the Christian Democrat-led government. They say they've got no intention of toppling Merkel, but they may issue policy demands that the Chancellor might find hard to accept.
And Iraq is breaking ranks ahead of the latest OPEC Plus summit. It's signaling the bloc will consider deeper cuts. That's despite the rest of the coalition showing reluctance to reduce output even further, which drove oil down on Friday. It's rebounding today. Most analysts expect no more cuts. OPEC's meeting in Vienna starts on December 5th.
Well, let's get some more on this with Bloomberg's executive editor for energy and commodities, Stuart Wallace, who joins us in the studio. Stuart, good morning to you. Should we read into the moves on, well, first of all, I suppose, should the Iraqi stance on this, the suggestion that there may be cuts, does that have any credibility?
No, not a great deal. And I think largely everyone's going to ignore it on the basis that it's all very well to call for more cuts, but if you're the country that's been blindingly ignoring every quota you've ever been given ever, then it lacks credibility somewhat, I would say. And I think going into this meeting, it's clear that there are two countries that are going to call the shots, and that's Saudi Arabia and that's Russia. And that's where the real fight is. And it seems absolutely clear to everyone involved in this meeting, apart from perhaps the Iraqi oil minister, that the discussion is going to focus on compliance. In other words, exactly what I've been talking about. You can't come out and talk about cuts up, cuts down, this is what the quota should be, unless you've already done what you've said you're going to do. And Iraq certainly hasn't been doing that.
Yeah, and Stuart, very, very few analysts expect deeper output cuts from OPEC Plus at this meeting, and some are worried that we could therefore see Brent drop below $50 a barrel. Is there anything that could come out of the meeting that's bullish for oil in terms of an extension of the current agreement, or is that already priced in?
I think pretty much priced in, as things are. What they're going to be looking for is the rhetoric that comes out of it, particularly with regard to the Russians. So the Russians complied at the beginning of the agreement, and then slowly that's been slipping. I think they've managed to hit their target 3 months this year, something like that. In other words, basically paying no attention whatsoever to it. In addition to that, they're going to try and change the rules a little bit in their favour, which is probably not going to go down particularly well either. So watch the Russians and watch the Saudis, because the Saudis are there. They're going to give people a very, very hard time over their production and say, you've got to hit your limits. If you don't do it, we have no credibility. The oil price is going to crash.
And all this taking place, of course, while the Aramco IPO is going through. And a sense that, I don't know, I got a sense perhaps they're not quite as good as some had hoped, but they're covering where they wanted to be, just about.
Just about, and that is the key here. So when we look at similar IPOs in the kingdom, and on at least the retail investor portion of it, they're covered 20, 25, 30 times. This is struggling to get over 1 time covered. Now, look, these are a different order of magnitude. This is a giant IPO, so maybe it's not a fair comparison. What I would say is, given the amount of advertising, marketing, apparently you can't move 3 meters in Riyadh at the moment for an Aramco IPO poster, even at your petrol station and at your ATM. So in that environment, 1 time covered doesn't seem terrific, but at least they got it covered.
Is OPEC Plus going into this meeting in any way gambling that US shale's golden age is over, Stuart?
Yeah. Basically, that is the entire gamble.
I've read Javier Blas's headline out verbatim.
Yeah, no. Well, Javier has expended many words to basically say that, and that's what it comes down to. Is fundamentally is shale, or rather the shale growth, is that over? And look, it's not a particularly strange view to hold. I think even the EIA is making similar sort of forecasts, so it is getting to be the consensus.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Stuart Wallace, there, editor for energy and commodities, and of course the OPEC meeting taking place later this week. We'll see what comes out of it.
Let's get the world news now with Leanne Gerrans. Leanne.
Naira, good morning. Here in the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson is painting his party as one of law and order. That's after the terror attack in London that killed 2 people. It has cast a shadow over the election campaign. Opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn is blaming a decade of spending cuts to prisons. Johnson is blaming the previous Labour government's criminal justice legislation. Now to Spain. The annual United Nations climate change talks are kicking off today. That's in Madrid. Bloomberg's Laura Mullane has the details.
Thousands of government delegates, advocacy groups and company executives will meet for 2 weeks. In this edition of COP25, their goal is to reach an agreement to set up the rules for a global carbon market. That's part of the Paris Agreement goals to reduce emissions and fight climate change. In Madrid, Laura Millán, Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
NATO is celebrating its 70th anniversary, but tensions are mounting. And this time, it is not because of President Trump. As Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo reports, leaders meeting in London this week will have 2 other men to worry about.
That is Emmanuel Macron, who has openly questioned NATO, describing it as brain dead. And of course, Erdogan, who is also creating tensions by trying Russian military equipment and, of course, his incursion in Syria. All NATO leaders will have to talk about defense spending. They'll have to talk about future plans. But the situation looks at this point very shaky among them. In Brussels, Maria Tadeo, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And Australia is labelling the treatment of a writer detained in China on suspicion of espionage as unacceptable and are calling for his early release. Bloomberg's Jason Scott reports.
Yang Hengjun, a Chinese native who's now an Australian citizen, was detained in China in January. Australia's government says that Yang has been isolated, shackled and interrogated daily in his Chinese prison. Australia also announced on Monday it will create a new task force to tackle foreign interference amid continued headlines about meddling in the nation's political affairs by China. In Canberra, Jason Scott, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok and Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Jan Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Roger.
Thanks very much, Leanne. Now, here's a quick reminder of a couple of things you should be watching this week. The world's largest climate summit, COP25. It begins today in Madrid. Some 200 nations are working on a pathway to rein in fossil fuel pollution. On Tuesday and Wednesday, the 29-member NATO alliance meets in London as it faces concerns about its continued purpose and durability. And coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Daniel Liu, head of portfolio management at Real Singapore, will be joining us to talk over what's been happening in China. Of course, we got the PMI data that has suggested that the Chinese factory output is somewhat better than had previously been expected, or the factory mood at least.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking. Now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Today, nearly all business is international business. The same goes for business disputes. That's why the International Center for Dispute Resolution provides a faster, more efficient approach to dispute resolution across borders. Backed by the American Arbitration Association, the ICDR is the world's leading provider of dispute resolution services. Find out why global expertise matters. Visit ICDR.org.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery is running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We can't in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
This winter, there's no place like Wicked, the award-winning West End musical. Discover the incredible untold story of the Witches of Oz and how one came to be called good and the other wicked. Wicked at London's Apollo Victoria Theatre. Extra shows added for Christmas.
On 3, our unlimited data is actually unlimited, like for reals. That means you can scroll and scroll and scroll through all the Black Friday deals.
Because we have no speed limits, no data caps, and you'll be 5G ready at no extra cost.
Wow, so many savings.
Our Black Friday deals are now on. Save up to £480. Switch to 3, in-store or online. See 3.co.uk/unlimited-data. Savings on selected phones on 24-month contracts. Ends 5th of December. Terms apply.
It's here at Amazon this Christmas. Our Cyber Monday sale has new deals every day. So there'll be more, and more.
Wow, best present ever.
The Amazon Cyber Monday sale, delivering all you need for less. Now on, ends 2nd of December.
Everybody needs somebody. Everybody needs somebody.
Boots is brightening up Black Friday with save up to half price on brands like No. 7, Jack Wills, Soap and Glory, and Harry Potter. Find these and more dazzling deals in-store and online today. Boots, let's feel good. Offer ends 2nd of December. Selected products available in selected stores and boots.com. Exclusions apply.
Tonight, TuneIn has your Monday night NFL football with the Minnesota Vikings at the Seattle Seahawks. Kickoff at 8:15 p.m. Eastern.
Thrown down the middle, caught, touchdown over the shoulder, back of the end zone, Snead. Wow!
At home or on the go, hear the home and away call of every NFL game this season on TuneIn Premium.
50, round 40, round 30, round 20, round 10. Back shoulder fade for Harry in the end zone. Caught it! Touchdown!
Upgrade today.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown to Keenan.
Search NFL today.
It's headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Roger Hearing with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. And the enthusiasm that we saw earlier in Asia, 3/4 of an hour into the European opening, certainly seems to have carried over. Stock 600 up 0.5%, FTSE 100 up 0.7%, the CAC and the DAX both up 0.6%, and that seems to be based largely on the figures coming out of China, the PMI data there suggesting that things are going a little bit better, but also possibly of an effect, therefore, on the global economy. And looking ahead to the US opening, again, the optimism seems to be there too. S&P, Dow and NASDAQ futures all up 0.4% at the moment. We're also seeing, I guess, that reflected in terms of bonds, because US 10-year treasuries, we're seeing the benchmark at the moment up 7 basis points, 1.85 handle. We're also seeing the Japanese yen, the yen-dollar rate going down a bit, again 109.7 at the moment. So an interesting time there. And WTI oil is the other one, because oil very much had a drop on Friday, but now making up some of those gains. $56.13 the barrel WTI at 1.74%. Brent crude $61.37 the barrel at 1.45%, possibly based on speculation from the Iraqis that there may be cuts in production at the OPEC meeting this week, although that's been very much dropped on by everyone else, so perhaps that won't happen, but we will see. Right, that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Roger, good morning. Iraq's parliament has voted to accept the resignation of the country's prime minister. It follows weeks of violent anti-government demonstrations in which hundreds of people have been killed. But there are concerns about a potential political crisis over Abdel Mohadi's replacement, because there are numerous coalition parties within the parliament. Bank of England Governor, that's Mark Carney, has accepted a new job. After leaving Threadneedle Street, he'll become UN Special Envoy for Climate Action and Finance. His new pay packet, just $1 a year. Carney is due to leave his current job on January the 31st, but his successor hasn't yet been named. It's boosted speculation he may be asked to extend his term. And finally, Black Friday hit a record in the US on online sales. Nearly $7.5 billion of sales were made via smartphone and computer. It was the second biggest digital sales day in American history, behind 2018 Cyber Monday. And today, it could be even bigger. It's likely to outshine that record by about 19%. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Yang Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Well, I have to say, I did absolutely zero shopping online or on smartphone, Leanne. I physically went to the shops like I said I would. The discounts were a bit disappointing. Everywhere I was pretty much seeing 30% off, which I didn't think that was that impressive.
Well, I'm like you, Naira. I think you and I are the same sort of breed. I went to all the shops, had a good look around, also bought some stuff, not online. But I also thought that
people still go to shops.
And what I like
yes,
trying
Roger.
Stuff on.
Even millennials like
well,
Leanne and myself.
Buildings,
yes.
You go inside.
And they're epic.
It's just weird.
But you can try on lipsticks, you can try on dresses.
I bought a lipstick.
Oh, you see,
it wasn't on sale though.
Full price, but it will do. But yeah, no, I know, 25% off. I was thinking the same thing, neighbour. We wanted 70% off, didn't we?
Exactly. We'll have to wait a few more weeks. Leanne Gerrans with the World News. Thank you so much. Now let's turn to our guest for the rest of the hour. We won't ask him about Black Friday sales. Darren Liu, Head of Portfolio Management at Rail Singapore, with us in the London studio. Darryl, great to speak to you again, and thanks so much for joining us in the studio. So we're seeing a fair amount of risk on in both equity and bond markets today, and a lot of it seems to be off the back of China data, which could be down to seasonal factors, and also after we sort of heard about the prospects for large-scale stimulus from the PBOC as perhaps not something we should look forward to. So is the amount of optimism that we've seen in markets today causing you concern, given that actually there's not a whole lot for it to go off today?
Yes, exactly. Because I think when you look at the situation, I think what's pretty clear is that China's not going to do the same degree of stimulus that they did the last two times around, in 2009 and then I think back in 2016 as well. I think they recognize the folly of opening up the spigots of liquidity, and that causes unintended consequences as well, which they're dealing with today, which is why they're still continuing to delever. So I think the expectations here is that the Chinese government is going to continue to do targeted stimulus in specific sectors, but they are not prepared to bail out the global economy as they have the last two times around, because they've had to suffer the consequences.
But Darryl, I mean, you're very much overweight cash, underweight equities at the moment, very defensive position. So I would say, well, you're maintaining that, but you've kind of, there's a lot of movement in equities, the rally, that you've missed out on as a result of this, and that going forward may have the same into 2020.
Well, that's true. But actually, when we look at the portfolio performance on a year-to-date basis, we've pretty much been keeping up with the benchmark numbers, even though we've been underweight risk assets, because generally the sectors and markets they were in have actually done pretty well. But it's true to a certain degree, because the problem we have is more for new accounts where we haven't really deployed cash, and we've been kind of holding back the initial deployment because of the concerns about going into markets where we think it's a bit toppish. But you have a valid point in the sense that if you are out of markets altogether this year, then you would have missed out on a really, really good year. But I mean, looking at things in context, back in December last year, that's when we actually put money back into the market, because we thought that markets were really oversold in December 2018. But it's just that we probably took money off the table maybe a bit arguably too early this year. Probably in March, April, that's when we started to reduce equity exposures, hold a bit more cash, because markets actually rebounded pretty strongly at the beginning of this year. And when you look further out to 2020, as I think I've said, I think when we look at the rally this year in risk assets, the bulk of the rally has been driven by multiple expansion on expectations of a rebound in the economy. And while arguably you can say that there have been some signs of that starting to show up in the past couple of weeks in terms of the data, it's not to that degree where we are totally bullish and starting to think about putting all the cash deployment back into equities at this point in time, because a lot of things still could go wrong.
So what is your biggest fear in terms of actually participating in the risk asset rally? Is it that with the downturn in the global economy is worse than is being priced, or is it that central bankers won't step in and provide that liquidity even if we do see the slowdown continue into 2020?
Well, I think our concern is the saying that you kind of got to participate while the music is still playing, and the problem here is, when is that music going to stop? Because we are arguably pretty late in the cycle this time around already. While it's still not our base case scenario that we're going to see a recession in 2020, we think that probably that is not that far away further down the road. Might be 2021, might be 2022. And when you look at it from that perspective, is this the right time to be taking on risk in your portfolios? And arguably, most of all our clients have enjoyed pretty decent gains on a year-to-date basis. Do you still want to be chasing the market at this point in the cycle? Markets could go up quite a bit more. But when we look at the risk reward of the upside and the downside, we think the risk is more to the downside, because a lot of the good news has already been priced in our opinion.
Well, what about the European area? Because it has been very interesting. We've had some PMI data, in fact, coming out this morning. Yep. France, November manufacturing PMI 51.7, preliminary was 551.6. We've seen movements in that sort of area, and of course we've got Christine Lagarde talking to the MEPs today. Do you get a sense that perhaps it's bottoming out, the problems are bottoming out, and maybe we're turning the corner in Europe?
I think you've got to look at Europe numbers in context. You've got to look at that in the context of the global economy and how things are. Because I think Europe, by and large, is still mainly export driven. And when we look at the situation, it's a bit akin to our view on Asia, actually, because we do see a turnaround in terms of economic numbers coming out from
Can I just interrupt you very briefly and say German November manufacturing PMI 41.1 just come out. The preliminary was 43.8, so similar.
Yeah, exactly. So there could be signs of green shoots in that area, in that regard, because, depending on, of course, when this phase one deal gets done, possibly you get a bit more trade certainty, companies start going about CapEx again, start expanding. I don't think we'll see a sharp V-shaped recovery, because I think there's still a number of risks and concerns out there. But I think we do expect a pickup in terms of global exports, and that would be positive for the European sector as well.
Daryl, you underweight equities, you're holding cash. I'm wondering what your view on bond markets is, because if you do take a little bit more of a gloomy outlook in terms of the global economy in 2020, is it attractive to be in treasuries right now, or dare I say even in Chinese bonds based on yield?
Yeah, I think on the treasury question, we do have some exposure in treasuries. We did have a lot more exposure in the beginning of the year. We trimmed it and we added a bit back there. I think it's always important to have some degree of US treasuries from a portfolio diversification perspective. But on your point on Chinese bonds, actually that's an area where I'm pretty positive on. For a couple of factors. One, I'm positive on the renminbi, mainly because I think that it's heavily underowned by global investors. And I think when you look at in terms of trends moving forward, the renminbi is going to be an increasingly more and more important currency. I think one of the factors post-GFC is that a lot of the Asian economies, for example, are starting to move away from dollar-based, because they recognize the problems of the financial crisis that we saw in 2008. There's a shortage of US dollar liquidity in Asia. And actually with yours, for example, a Korean exporter, why do you need to settle in US dollar if you're exporting to China, for example? Why not you settle in renminbi? And I think increasingly a lot more Asian companies are starting to do that.
All right, Daryl, thanks very much. Daryl Liu, their Head of Portfolio Management at Rail Singapore, joining us. And coming up, Anna Edwards and Caroline Hepker are back on Daybreak Europe. I'll be speaking to Benjamin Jones, who's Senior Multi-Asset Strategist at State Street.
And we are risk on in the session today. We're seeing US futures point higher, also European equities in the green following the China data. This is Bloomberg.
eBay's Black Friday deals are here. Oh my god. An Oral-B Smart 5000 toothbrush that was £99 is now only £49.
Blimey, that's good.
Or a Samsung 50-inch 4K TV that was £379 is now only £349.
Stop it, that's amazing.
And with free delivery, it's never been easier. There's still time to shop Black Friday deals on eBay.
Get it!
Limited availability, T's and C's apply.
On 3, our unlimited data is actually unlimited, like for reals. That means you can scroll and scroll and scroll through all the Black Friday deals.
Because we have no speed limits, no data caps, and you'll be 5G ready at no extra cost.
Wow, so many savings.
Our Black Friday deals are now on. Save up to £480. Switch to 3, in-store or online. See 3.co.uk/unlimited-data. Savings on selected phones on 24-month contracts. Ends 5th of December. Terms apply.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown to Keenan.
Search NFL today.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
External pressure is going to be an opportunity for reform in China. I think liquidity more generally across financial markets is an issue and a concern.
The Spanish banks in particular are in a much better place than they were 5 years ago.
It wouldn't be great to have a drawn-out trade conflict with the US or indeed with anybody else. But I've never been one to prophesy where sterling will be, and you're a madman if you think you can.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards.
And I'm Caroline Hepker. Warm welcome to the programme. So lots on the agenda today. Christine Lagarde speaking at the ECB later. And then also the lead that the Tories had over Labour Party in the election seems to be narrowing somewhat.
Yes, and the latter of those moving the pound just a little bit this morning. Let's get to another big narrative across the globe, actually, and that is the manufacturing data, the PMI readings that we're getting for various economies. The Euro area November manufacturing PMI is the latest part of that puzzle. 46.9 is the number there. That is better than the preliminary number of 46.6, just better, not by much, but it is a little better than we'd anticipated, or the previous reading there. It's still very much below 50, though, Caroline, still in contraction territory for the Euro area manufacturing story. But we were talking with Ben Jones on TV from State Street in the last hour, and he was talking about stabilisation in the European growth story, and we'll put those thoughts to him once again. We'll put the latest data to him and get his thoughts on where we are there. We also had some stabilising data out of China on the PMI numbers. And in fact, that PMI number from China coming in better than all of the estimates on the Bloomberg terminal. So that was taken as a very positive sign for the Asian equity session, and increasingly so for the European session as well. We get to the data now then and where we are on European equity markets. The Stoxx 600 up by 0.6%, as is the FTSE 100, and the CAC 40, the Xetra-DAX getting even better gains, up by 0.7%. The Asian session was positive, as I said, buoyed, lifted by the strength of that data out of China. We also see that lifting oil prices, so we're up by 1.8% at 56.17 on WTI. But keep in mind that we lost more than 5% in oil prices on Friday, so we're just making up some of the ground that we lost there. The global growth story, part of that, the extent to which OPEC and friends are going to decide to roll their production cuts into next year, maybe even increase their production cuts. We've heard from the Iraqis on that front. We'll talk more about that later. So broadly speaking, we see a risk-on mood in markets overnight and into Europe. We see money coming into equity markets and coming out of sovereign debt markets, and so the yield on the US 10-year edges up a little, 1.85%. Caroline, to your point about where the polls leave us, the pound on cable is down 0.1%, 129.14, as we see Labour closing that gap that the Tories have in the polls. A little bit more reaction in the earlier part of the session in the euro pound, but we now see it sticking to cable as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting also because there's another big political story in Europe, isn't there, which is Angela Merkel's junior coalition party, the SPD, changing their leadership. It's not Olaf Scholz, which was possibly expected, but sort of more left-wing couple duo of leaders, and so that may actually put in peril Angela Merkel's coalition government. So lots of politics. But let's also talk about the data that you mentioned, China. So the Caixin China November manufacturing PMI, it did come in better than expected, 51.8. But having said that, Beijing is reiterating that it wants tariffs to be rolled back before any trade deal can be agreed with the United States. And then at the same time this morning, China sanctioning several US NGOs in retaliation over President Donald Trump's signing of a bill backing Hong Kong protesters. So what do we make of China, of the US-China trade spat? Let's bring in Benjamin Jones, who is senior multi-asset strategist at State Street. Ben, you've been saying obviously very much avoiding Hong Kong in terms of investments and equities. How much disruption, though, do you think that the Hong Kong issue is going to pose to the US-China potential trade deal?
I don't think too much to the trade deal. I mean, Hong Kong's got severe problems, and we've seen that again in some of the data this morning. But when it comes to the trade spat, I think actually it's going to be something that is going to be kept relatively separate. Certainly the signing of this bill by Trump last week perhaps threw a little bit of a spanner in the works. But if you look at what's happened over the course of the last 6 months with Hong Kong, China's actually been very, it's taken sort of a back seat with respect to China. It hasn't really gone in full scale on China. So I don't think a lot of the sanctions and possible ramifications of this bill will actually come to pass.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, to see China to sanction US rights groups over the Hong Kong legislation. It seems as if the Chinese themselves may be trying to keep this away from the US administration a little bit, and so not to allow the signing of this Hong Kong bill by the US to mess up the trade conversations. But to Caroline's point, I mean, perhaps also of interest, the extent to which the Chinese are going to demand rollback of tariffs as we get towards the December 15th deadline, next deadline for new tariffs to come in. There is the opportunity still for this to go in either direction, do you think, Ben? Or do you think that this is heading towards a phase one deal?
On balance, I would say I think it probably is, but my degree of confidence in that is fairly low, really. I mean, I think you're right. This could go in either direction very, very quickly. I mean, and particularly the problem we have with Donald Trump is he is a very unpredictable entity. We've seen that over the course of this year. So the news flow on this could change overnight. It could be changing as we're sitting here right now. It's very, very difficult to predict. But I think the mood that's coming out at the moment is that there does want to be some form of deal to be signed. Now, I don't think it's going to be an all-encompassing full-scale deal. I think we're still going to be talking about trade all the way through 2020. But one of the things that we see quite clearly at the moment is that really the costs of the tariffs at the moment are falling on US corporates, not the Chinese and not the US consumer at the moment. So this is an impetus for Donald Trump to want to do something to at least offer some concessions on some of those rollbacks, particularly as you head into an election year.
Well, talk about unpredictable. I note that President Donald Trump arrives here in the UK for the NATO summit later.
He'll be in our time zone for this week,
exactly.
won't he? Which adds a little spice via Twitter to the morning sessions.
Absolutely. But just to talk a little bit more about where you see investments now. I mean, you seem to be quite cautious going into year end, not much movement. You're expecting equities to go slightly higher into year end, but you still are looking to the US, Europe, excluding the UK, and emerging market Asian equities. Those are still your buys. Where in Europe, though, given that Europe is really stuck between China and the United States at the moment?
Well, again, I think what we're trying to look at is for some of those areas where the concern around trade and the concern around manufacturing growth in particular has just got a little bit too far, where there's a bit too much pessimism. So we've been positive on some areas of Europe through the course of this year, places like Switzerland and Netherlands, but there tend to be more of the defensive areas. What we're looking at now is more places like Germany and France, which are geared, and Sweden as well, more geared into the industrial pickup. And again, to that word that I was talking about with Anna earlier, stabilisation in some of these numbers. It's just, I think that people have got a bit too pessimistic on the manufacturing side. So if we get a little bit of an improvement there, some of those areas, some of the cyclical areas of Europe can start to do a little bit better.
Why do you think we're seeing this stabilisation in the data, Ben?
I think a lot of it is around the idea that actually the consumer is still in good health around the world. And that's not just in the US. In fact, if you look at Europe, consumer spending has held up very strongly all the way through the course of this year. And most recently, we've even seen an improvement in some of the auto sales numbers in Europe as well. So I think there's this realization that although the trade war is rumbling on in the background, and that means that we have seen a slowdown in capital expenditure, particularly on the heavy industrial side in the US, actually people still go out, they still buy stuff, they still spend, and we still need to make things. So that's why I think you're seeing, as I say, a stabilization. And as you pointed out, some of the manufacturing PMIs there, they might be looking like they're bottoming out, but they are still in contractionary territory. So it's not as if we're going back to a surge in rampant growth. It's more just a bottoming out in some of these numbers at the moment.
Yeah, well, of course, we can't forget last week, we're just coming out of Thanksgiving, Black Friday, the online sales were a record, $7.4 billion in the United States. Today is expected to be strong too. So, yeah, the consumer, potentially that's a good sign there too. Yeah. Benjamin Jones. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's Senior Multi-Asset Strategist at State Street, Ben, on Bloomberg Television and Radio this morning.
Now for the latest in global news, here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans.
Anna, good morning. Let's start here in the UK. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is painting his party as one of law and order. That's after the terror attack in London that killed 2 people. It's cast a shadow over the election campaign. Opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn is blaming a decade of spending cuts to prisons. Johnson is blaming the previous Labour government's criminal justice legislation.
What I have said since coming to office in the last 3 or 4 months is that I think this whole system of automatic early release, which was brought in by Labour, it was under that system.
You've been in power for 10
years. It was under that. Sorry, I've only been in office for 120 days.
That was Prime Minister Boris Johnson speaking to the BBC's Andrew Marr there. Malta's Prime Minister Joseph Muscat has announced he will resign next month amid mounting pressure over the death of a journalist in 2017. Bloomberg's John Verlaine has this report on corruption on the island.
Muscat said he'll stay in office until his Labour Party elects a new leader and Prime Minister. The Premier has been struggling to put behind him allegations of a political cover-up over the 2017 killing of Daphne Caruana Galizia, who reported extensively on corruption on the island. In Rome, John Verlaine, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now to the US. President Trump is declining to take part in the House impeachment hearing this Wednesday, but he's keeping open the possibility of testifying at a later session. The president's lawyer saying the whole process has been unfair to Donald Trump, adding the hearing was scheduled, quote, no doubt purposely while Trump is at the NATO meeting here in London. And in Hong Kong, demonstrators have returned to the streets. Police fired tear gas as thousands of protesters marched in Hong Kong's tourist district on Sunday. That's as tensions re-emerge after the euphoria of pro-democracy victories at district council elections, which happened last weekend. Protesters also marched to the US consulate to express gratitude after President Trump signed legislation last week expressing support for the demonstrators. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Caroline.
Thank you so much, Leanne. Now with the morning sports news, here's George Alderman.
Under pressure, Everton boss Marco Silva believes his players showed they're still giving him everything in their 2-1 Premier League defeat at Leicester. They did take a 1-0 lead in the first half before conceding the deciding goal deep into injury time. Silva's side are just 2 points clear of the relegation zone. He's prepared to accept the blame for their position in the table.
I know what is my job, I know what is my responsibility as well, and I will be always here for my players, always. I'm not here never to blame no one of my players. It's too easy maybe for someone to do that, but Marco Silva will not do that.
Leicester are back up to second, 8 points behind leaders Liverpool. Arsenal's new interim head coach Freddie Ljungberg had to settle for a 2-2 draw with Norwich in his first game in charge. Manchester United against Aston Villa ended with the same score. Wolves drew 1-1 with Sheffield United. Watford could appoint a new head coach as early as today. The Premier League's bottom team sacked Quique Sanchez-Flores yesterday. Chris Hughton and Paul Clement have been linked with the job. Non-league Boston will be in tonight's draw for the third round of the FA Cup. They could potentially face Premier League opposition after a goalless draw with Rochdale earned them a replay. The battle between Celtic and Rangers at the top of the Scottish Premiership has got even tighter. The champions are still leading the way on goal difference after thrashing Ross County 4-1. Stephen Gerrard's side hammered Hearts 5-0 at Ibrox. Barcelona star Lionel Messi is the big favourite to claim the prestigious Ballon d'Or award for a record 6th time this evening. Liverpool defender Virgil van Dijk is expected to be his main challenger for the prize, which recognises the best player in the world. And Britain's Lewis Hamilton is now just 7 race wins away from equalling Michael Schumacher's Formula 1 record of 91. The world champion registered victory at the season-ending Abu Dhabi Grand Prix.
George, thank you very much. George Alderman with your sport. Let's get US sport now from Pete Fox.
Sunday night football in Houston. The Patriots struck first with a field goal. From there, the Texans would not relinquish the lead, holding on for a 28-22 win, handing the Pats their second loss of the season. Tom Brady throwing for 326 and 3 touchdowns in the loss. Ravens and Niners played a tight one right to the very end. Justin Tucker's 49-yarder would win it for Baltimore. Their 8th consecutive, 20-17 the final. Chiefs rolling the Raiders at Arrowhead 40-9. Redskins win for the 3rd time. taking care of the Panthers in Carolina 29-21. And the Jets falling to the Bengals, Cincinnati winning for the first time 22-6. I'm Pete Fox, that's your Bloomberg NBC World Sports Update.
And still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, a coalition in crisis. Angela Merkel's sister party elects an anti-establishment duo as its leaders. We'll talk about our Bloomberg opinion piece on Germany next. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Are you looking for senior care for your mom or dad but don't know where to start? Hi, I'm Joan London with The Place for Mom. Nobody knows your parent or loved one better than you, and nobody knows senior living better than the experts at A Place for Mom. It's a free service, and we've helped thousands of families find the right place for their mom or dad. There's a place for answers, A Place for Mom. Call today.
Call A Place for Mom at 1-800-391-1755. That's 1-800-391-1755.
Right now, Doctors Without Borders medical teams are operating in some of the most remote and dangerous corners of the world. When front yards become front lines, at the crossroads of conflict and epidemic, where there are no hospitals, that's where we operate. Your response is critical to our response in places where few others will go. That's where we operate. Learn more at doctorswithoutborders.org.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Francine Lacroix on Bloomberg Surveillance.
Five Guys is a U.S. restaurant with around 100 stores in the U.K. and big expansion plans. That's despite Brexit uncertainty and difficult market conditions. Well, to talk about all of that and much more, I'm joined by the Five Guys UK Chief Executive, John Uckbert. John, do you ever worry about overexpansion? Do you worry about Brexit impacting your business?
Well, I mean, at this point, it's early days still. We have just opening our 100th store at St. Paul's next week, Monday, and we still think there's actually a lot to go. We think we may be halfway there here in the UK. So it feels like early days for the premium burger segment here in the UK. Of course, Five Guys was founded 30 years ago in America, so there's we're only 6 years in here, so I think it feels like there's a long way to go.
Do you worry about inflation in the UK and the costs that means for actually the things you buy, your food produce?
Sure. Well, cost of goods is a major part of our business, of course, and actually one of the biggest impacts has been the pound versus other currencies. And if you're buying product in non-pound currency and you're earning money in pounds, then of course you have a foreign exchange challenge in addition to inflation associated with it. So both from a currency perspective and from a product inflation perspective, you've got to be aware of both.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Bloomberg.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So the financial market starting risk on here in December. We're up 0.6% on the US stock 600, FTSE 100 up 0.7%, Xetra DAX gains 0.7%. We also had German November manufacturing PMI figures. They are standing at 44.1, so still in contraction territory, but better than the flash reading, which was 43.8. So the manufacturing PMI number for Germany comes in at 44.1. As for US market futures this morning, we're slightly higher. S&P 500 futures gained 0.3%, almost 0.4%. Dow Jones futures also up 0.4%. After we had some gains over in Asia, certainly for the Nikkei, jumping more than 1% this morning. As for the bond markets, so the China manufacturing PMI numbers were also quite good for November. So that saw bonds sinking this morning. Now we're trading at 1.85% for US benchmark yield, so a jump of 7.5 basis points. Chinese yields at 3.21%, so also up 4 basis points. As for the FX space, the polls suggesting that the Tory lead over Labour has narrowed down a little bit has affected the pound. We trade at 1.29, down 0.2%, and a big jump, the largest monthly gain for the dollar in 4 months in November. Actually, this morning, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index just stronger at 0.1%. That is Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Caroline, a vigil will be held this morning to pay tribute to those affected by the London Bridge terror attack. 23-year-old Saskia Jones and 25-year-old Jack Merritt were both killed by Usman Khan on Friday afternoon. The convicted terrorist had been attending a conference on prisoner rehabilitation hosted by the Cambridge University scheme Learning Together. Bank of England Governor Mark Carney has accepted a new job. After leaving Threadneedle Street, he'll become UN Special Envoy for Climate Action and Finance. His new pay packet, $1 a year. Carney is due to leave his current job on January the 31st, but his successor hasn't yet been named. It's boosted speculation he may be asked to extend his term. And finally, union officials will demonstrate outside Amazon's offices in London today over claims about the amount of tax it pays. The GMB and TUC groups claim the company should pay millions more, but avoids doing so through loopholes and subsidies. Amazon says the calculations are completely inaccurate and it pays all the taxes it owes. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok and Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by opinion columnist Andreas Kluth, who's been writing about the latest in German politics. Andreas, good morning to you. Your article on this, your opinion piece titled "Why Germany's Crisis is a Very Good Thing." Explain to us, why is this crisis a good thing?
Well, first of all, the crisis is there is now a possibility that this coalition breaks apart, although that's not at all a certainty. In Germany, these things tend to de-escalate. But what's happened is that the existing government is actually inexcusably mediocre, and it has been. It's the third coalition between these two parties, the center right and the center left. And in this particular term, they never wanted to get back together again, and they've only concentrated on lowest common denominator policies, working down a little laundry list of banal small beer stuff, when all the big questions in Europe and the world have not been getting answered or even asked by Merkel, who's now a lame duck, but instead by Macron, which has caused all sorts of problems. So they were in for a shake-up one way or the other, and that's what they're going to possibly get now.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the other way of interpreting it might be that it's consensus-driven politics. I mean, that's the kind of message that I think we get outside of Germany is that Germany is a consensus-driven political system. But what do you think the SPD are going to try to extract then from Merkel? Are they going to try to, push her much further in this kind of lame duck 18 months that she has left?
They have to, because first of all, the two winners are sort of lefties, and they didn't expect to win, but they were coming on so strong during the leadership contest. They have to demand something, and what exactly will be decided this coming weekend at an SPD Congress, and it's pointing towards the following three things. They're going to call for a higher minimum wage, 12 euros an hour. They're going to call for an end to the black zero policy. That's the balanced budget policy, and so more investment, and even if it means going into debt a little bit. And then third, for a tougher climate package. They recently passed a climate package, and they want a higher carbon price of 40 euros instead of 10 euros per metric ton. Those are also actually sensible policies and not nearly as radically left as what they'd been talking about before. So maybe they're trying to climb down. On the other hand, the Christian Democrats and the Bavarian Sister Party, they can't really afford to budge. So this weekend is when we should know more, if both sides are going to climb down or if we genuinely have a crisis.
And Andreas, we've got the NATO summit taking place this week. You talk about how this government has not grappled with, not dealt with the big geopolitical issues, the big issues of our time, focused instead on the sort of small beer. But what about the future of NATO? What is the latest German position on this? Because it is under fire from Paris to Ankara to Washington.
Yes, the Germans are freaked out. They were freaked out more than probably anyone else by the Trump victory, because they have, for all of post-war history, relied on this American shield over them, which is at the same time subsumed the old conflicts between France and Germany. And now that Trump is not sure anymore if Article 5, the joint common security agreement, is unconditional, Macron has stepped forward and said, well, maybe Article 5 isn't taken seriously anymore. Maybe we need a European alternative to NATO. And that's freaking the Germans out because they understand, I think, that that's not possible. In other words, they can't be a European army as they've rhetorically called for, but that's never going to happen. And that's why I think they're going to show up outside of London there at this NATO summit tomorrow, sort of reminded that a lot is at stake, and it's time to just, to remember that if we want Europe to be safe, there is no alternative to NATO.
Andreas, thank you very much. Bloomberg opinion columnist Andreas Kluth writing about the machinations of the German coalition and also the future of NATO this morning. You can read those stories and other stories from Bloomberg Opinion by typing OPIN GO on the terminal. Bloomberg.com/opinion. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. Some soccer news. City Football Group, the owner of Manchester City Soccer Club, agreed to buy a 65% stake in Indian Super League team Mumbai City. Existing shareholders, the actor and film producer Ranbir Kapoor and Bimal Parikh, will hold the remaining 35% of shares. On November 27th, Silver Lake announced the acquisition of a 10% holding in Manchester City at an implied valuation of about $4.8 billion. The former president of the Brazilian Football Confederation, CBF, has been banned from the game for life for bribery. FIFA says Ricardo Teixeira conducted bribery schemes linked to his role in awarding media and marketing rights contracts for international competitions. Teixeira, who is 72, was a member of FIFA's executive committee for almost 20 years. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Michael Barr. In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Witham offers VC expertise to address the advisory, audit, and tax needs of your investments.
I'm Chris DeMeo, Witham's Technology and Emerging Growth Services practice leader. The venture capital community continues to thrive in an era of disruption, fueling the growth of some of the greatest innovations over the last 25 years. Witham's Technology and Emerging Growth Services team services a variety of different venture-backed startups, lending predictive support and deep service experience, adding value to your portfolio.
Visit witham.com/VC for more information.
I love Black Friday. Busy shops, crazy people, average deals. It's so much fun.
Said no one ever. So be savvy and do Black Friday the easy way with Smarty. Grab a huge 100 gig data SIM for just £17 a month on the Mega Plan. And with no credit checks, speed restrictions or contracts tying you down, you can kick back with the best Black Friday deal around. Now that's Smarty. Search Smarty Mobile to find out more, but hurry, as this deal won't be around for long. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Every day it's a little harder.
Disney's Frozen 2.
Anna,
Elsa,
Kristoff,
Sven. The worldwide phenomenon has returned, captivating critics everywhere.
I believe in you, Elsa, more than anyone or anything.
With big laughs and even bigger songs. Disney's Frozen 2 in cinemas now.
I'll bring the snacks!
Hey, turn it down. Now play the big hit. That's better. Get our lowest ever price on these Bose QC35 wireless headphones. With noise cancellation and voice control in the Black Tag event at Curry's PC World. Or get £50 off Bose SoundLink on-ear wireless headphones. Either way, you get 6 months free Spotify in the Black Tag event at Curry's PC World. T's and C's apply.
Tonight, TuneIn has your Monday night NFL football with the Minnesota Vikings at the Seattle Seahawks. Kickoff at 8:15 p.m. Eastern.
Thrown down the middle, caught, touchdown over the shoulder, back in the end zone, Snead! Wow!
At home or on the go, hear the home and away call of every NFL game this season on TuneIn Premium.
50, round 40, round 30, round 20, round 10. Back shoulder fade for Harry in the end zone. Caught it! Touchdown!
Upgrade today.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slammed it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB Digital Radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And it's 9:30 a.m. here in London, 10:30 in Berlin and across Europe. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Anna Edwards. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. We check the data for you every 15 minutes here on Bloomberg Radio, so let's do that right now. We've got the Stock 600 actually up by 0.5% right now, which is a bigger move to the upside than the futures had led us to anticipate. So we are seeing some move higher on these European equity markets. The FTSE 100 up by 0.6%, getting some decent gains. The Xetra DAX also up by 0.6%, and you can see some of the sectors that support both of those indexes moving higher this morning. So basic resources, oil and gas, both of those good for London, of course, and both of those sectors flying high, both up more than 1% in this morning's session. Autos and parts also up by 0.7%, so that helps the German market. And broadly speaking, we're reacting to the positive data coming out of China and the increasingly stabilizing global growth picture that we have from the PMI manufacturing side of things. So the Chinese data came in better than any of the estimates. The picture we're gradually building up around the euro area and the manufacturing PMI for November, it's still below 50, but it has stabilized, and it certainly came in a little bit higher than the preliminary number, than the estimates. So that's a positive risk-on story for stocks, and seeing money going into stocks and coming out of fixed income. US futures, with that in mind, point up by between 3 and 0.4%. So as we've gone through the first couple of hours of the European session, we've seen those US futures gaining momentum. Some other assets for you. Oil prices also responding to that better Chinese data and the better growth trajectory for the global economy. 56.41 is where we trade on WTI, up by 2.2%. Of course, we lost more than 5% in Friday's session on oil prices, so just making up some of that lost ground. As I say, money going into stocks and coming out of bonds, and so we see the yield on the US 10-year a little bit higher. 1.85 is where we trade. The dollar getting a little bit of support in today's session. We see money coming out of the yen. The yen is weaker. We also see the pound is a little bit weaker against the US dollar, down 0.1% on the narrowing of the Tories' poll lead ahead of the elections.
Okay, also another news line out of the UK. November manufacturing PMI comes in at 48.9. The preliminary number was 48.3. So that really adding to that PMI story of sort of better PMI numbers globally, but still below 50 here in the UK for the manufacturing number. So still in contraction territory. Right, let's also talk about another story this morning. Hong Kong retail sales, they have slumped over 24%. in the latest sign that the ongoing unrest is hitting the city's economy. At the same time, China appears to be striking back at the US over President Trump's decision to sign the bill backing Hong Kong protesters. Well, for more on these stories, let's go live to Hong Kong, where Bloomberg's Asia cross-asset editor Eric Lam is standing by. Good to speak to you. The fallout from the protests, 5 months long, really being felt in retail sales. What stood out in the data for you?
Yeah, certainly the headline number is continues to be very eye-popping as a fresh record. We had just had the previous record was set back in August, so it's been 4 straight months now of double-digit declines in terms of retail sales value. Digging into the numbers, we're seeing some of the biggest declines were in categories like electronics, watches and jewelry, and also medicine and cosmetics. And these are they line up fairly well with some of the products that are commonly purchased quite often by visitors and tourists and into Hong Kong, especially from the mainland. And we saw just on Friday that mainland visitor arrivals to Hong Kong had actually dropped by a record 46%. So it really did herald the numbers that we were going to see today were going to be, as the Financial Secretary Paul Chan said, very enormous, and it turned out to be just that case.
Okay, so these very enormous numbers, how does that weigh on the city, which is already in recession then, Eric?
Yeah, in Paul Chan's comments to lawmakers earlier this morning in Hong Kong, he basically said that we're going to be seeing the first budget deficit for the city in more than a decade, going back to the early 2000s. Now, that's coming at the end of really a long run of consistent budget surpluses for the Hong Kong government. So this is a real change of dynamics for what has been overall very consistent surpluses for the government. The recession that we fell into officially in the third quarter, the consensus now is that we're going to see a overall contraction for the year. The government is forecasting a contraction of 1.3% for 2019, and that is roughly where economists agree that it's going to be at least that, or if not more, for the year.
Yeah, and the other main story, of course, that we've been watching is the US-China trade deal. China this morning saying that it's taking steps to retaliate against this US legislation aimed at supporting Hong Kong protesters. But it does look as if both China and the US are trying to sort of keep the Hong Kong issue separate to the trade agreement, potential trade deal.
Yeah, they're trying to, but it's been a consistent point of contention for the two countries over the past few months, certainly intensifying as this bill has gone through Congress and into with President Trump signing the bill. The latest retaliation from China, they've been saying that they've been threatening retaliations, and today we got some details on that. They have decided to introduce sanctions on some American rights groups, and they're also saying that they're going to halt port visits for the U.S. Navy in Hong Kong, but they did not give any specifics on exactly how they were going to enforce that. Now, one academic said that this is fairly unprecedented given the 40 years of history of diplomatic history between the U.S. and China. So once again, we are kind of in uncharted waters here.
Okay, Eric, thanks very much. From Hong Kong, Bloomberg's Asia cross-asset editor Eric Lam with an update on where the dire retail sales leave the economy, which is already struggling.
Now, let's get all the latest in global news. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Let's start here in the UK. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is painting his party as one of law and order. That's after the terror attack in London that killed 2 people. It has cast a shadow over the election campaign. Opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn is blaming a decade of spending cuts to prisons. Johnson is blaming the previous Labour government's criminal justice legislation. Now to Spain. The annual United Nations climate change talks are kicking off today. That's happening in Madrid. Bloomberg's Laura Mullane has the details.
Thousands of government delegates, advocacy groups and company executives will meet for 2 weeks. In this edition of COP25, their goal is to reach an agreement to set up the rules for a global carbon market. That's part of the Paris Agreement goals to reduce emissions and fight climate change. In Madrid, Laura Millán, Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
NATO is celebrating its 70th anniversary, but tensions are mounting. This time, it is not because of President Trump. As Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo reports, leaders meeting in London this week will have 2 other men to worry about.
That is Emmanuel Macron, who has openly questioned NATO, describing it as brain dead. And of course, Erdogan, who is also creating tensions by trying Russian military equipment and, of course, his incursion in Syria. All NATO leaders will have to talk about defense spending. They'll have to talk about future plans. But the situation looks at this point very shaky among them. In Brussels, Maria Tadeo, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And Australia is labelling the treatment of a writer detained in China on suspicion of espionage as unacceptable and are calling for his release. Bloomberg's Jason Scott reports.
Yang Hengjun, a Chinese native who's now an Australian citizen, was detained in China in January. Australia's government says that Yang has been isolated, shackled and interrogated daily in his Chinese prison. Australia also announced on Monday it will create a new task force to tackle foreign interference amid continued headlines about meddling in the nation's political affairs by China. In Canberra, Jason Scott, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Anna.
Thanks very much for that. Now with your morning sports news, here's George Alderman.
Under pressure, Everton boss Marco Silva believes his players showed they're still giving him everything in their 2-1 Premier League defeat at Leicester. They did take a 1-0 lead in the first half before conceding the deciding goal deep into injury time. Silva's side are just 2 points clear of the relegation zone. He's prepared to accept the blame for their position in the table.
I know what is my job, I know what is my responsibility as well, and I will be always here for my players, always. I'm not here never to blame no one of my players. It's too easy maybe for someone to do that, but Marco Silva will not do that.
Leicester are back up to second, 8 points behind leaders Liverpool. Arsenal's new interim head coach, Freddie Ljungberg, had to settle for a 2-2 draw with Norwich in his first game in charge. Manchester United against Aston Villa ended with the same score. Wolves drew 1-1 with Sheffield United. And Britain's Lewis Hamilton is now just 7 race wins away from equalling Michael Schumacher's Formula One record of 91. The world champion registered victory at the season-ending Abu Dhabi Grand Prix.
So, your European Sports Roundup, and here's a look at what you should be watching this week. So, the world's largest climate summit, COP25, begins today in Madrid. Some 200 nations are working on a pathway to rein in fossil fuel pollution. Then on Tuesday and Wednesday, the 29-member NATO alliance meets in London as it faces concerns about its continued purpose and durability. And then the House impeachment inquiry on Wednesday shifts into a new phase with public hearings in the Judiciary Committee.
We also keep an eye on OPEC events taking place in Vienna, the NATO summit just north of London, and on Friday we get US payroll. So lots happening this week. Coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe in the next few minutes, Stephen King, Senior Economic Advisor at HSBC, will get his thoughts on whether the global growth story is really stabilising. That seems to be the picture from the latest PMI data. Stephen King joins us next. This is Bloomberg.
Tom has been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. I was really starting to worry.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Every investor should ask questions.
Is our money in the right place?
What am I really being charged? And is it eating into my returns?
Is my advisor a fiduciary? Is he always a fiduciary?
A good place to start is with an independent registered investment advisor. As fiduciaries, they live by a simple rule. Always act in the best interest of their clients. That's why Charles Schwab is proud to support more independent financial advisors and their clients than anyone else. Visit findyourindependengadvisor.com.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery is running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We hunt in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
This winter, there's no place like Wicked, the award-winning West End musical. Discover the incredible untold story of the Witches of Oz and how one came to be called good and the other wicked. Wicked at London's Apollo Victoria Theatre. Extra shows added for Christmas.
On 3, our unlimited data is actually unlimited, like for reals. That means you can scroll and scroll and scroll through all the Black Friday deals.
Because we have no speed limits, no data caps, and you'll be 5G ready at no extra cost.
Wow, so many savings.
Our Black Friday deals are now on. Save up to £480. Switch to 3, in-store or online. See 3.co.uk/unlimited-data. Savings on selected phones on 24-month contracts. Ends 5th of December. Terms apply.
At TradePoint, we know that big jobs can mean a big shop around. We've a wide range of products from kitchens to plumbing to electrical or timber, so you can get it all in one place. 7 days a week, making big jobs smaller. So, for all you need, when you need it, get to TradePoint or go to tradepoint.co.uk.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Far wing, elevates, triple bucket.
The war of the crowd. The shot clock ticks down. Will the ball go in? The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. And the replays just don't cut
the
it.
Sideline, the man fleet for 3.
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season streaming live, so you can be there when it matters most. Hear it now, hear it live on TuneIn.
Fake in the lane, turnaround jumper from 8 feet is good on
Search
the right.
NBA today to start listening.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Bayless. Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So European equities gained 0.4% this morning. We've had a pretty strong rally for European markets so far this year, up 21%. And we've also had positivity because of the official manufacturing data out of China, showing showing that it exceeded all estimates in a Bloomberg survey, at least for last month. So that gave traders some confidence that perhaps global growth isn't faltering. We shall see. The other data that we've been watching this morning, a lot of the manufacturing PMI numbers out of Europe, including in Germany. We are in contraction territory, but we beat the flash reading. So the November manufacturing PMI for Germany, 44.1. As for US futures going into the trading day there, we gained 0.3% for the S&P 500 and Dow Jones futures this morning. Of course, after we had a kind of slightly quieter week last week in the US, obviously because of Thanksgiving. In terms of the bond markets right now, we are trading at 1.85% for US benchmark yields. So a real slump in bonds as yields rally 7.5 basis points. We saw something similar happen in Asia. Chinese yields at 3.21%, so also up by 4 basis points. German yields negative 27 basis points. So of 8 basis points in yield there. Gold this morning has been retreating. I'll give you a check on that. 1,455.93, so down by 0.5% for the gold spot price, and a jump of 2.6% for WTI crude. We saw the slump last week, but we're gaining this morning. $56.61. Brent crude at 61.97, also up by 2.5%. This in OPEC week. Iraq saying that there could be more cuts, but that doesn't seem to be the signal that we've had from other major producers. So we'll be reporting on that all week. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Germany's government thrown into crisis. That's as the junior coalition partner elects a new leadership. The Social Democrats bringing in a team that vocally opposes the alliance with Chancellor Angela Merkel's CDU. But the new leadership is signalling it won't bring an abrupt end to the coalition. It is more likely to put forward a set of new demands. Bank of England Governor Mark Carney has accepted a new job. After leaving Threadneedle Street, he'll become UN Special Envoy for Climate Action and Finance. His new pay packet, $1 a year. Carney is due to leave his current job on January the 31st, but his successor hasn't yet been named. It's boosted speculation he may be asked to extend his term. And finally, Black Friday hit a record in US online sales. Nearly $7.5 billion of sales were made via smartphone or computer. It was the second biggest digital sales day in American history, behind 2018 Cyber Monday, and today could be even bigger. It's likely to outshine that record by around 19%. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much, Leanne. Now, coming up next, our colleagues in the United States are getting ready for Bloomberg Daybreak. So let's check in with John Tucker. Good morning, John. What's ahead for you?
Oh, Caroline, good morning to you. Happy Monday morning. Lots of developments on the China-U.S. trade front could threaten to derail the talks. At the same time, we had better than expected manufacturing readings from China and the Eurozone, spurring hope that maybe the global economy is turning a corner. Easy money, that means a lack of volatility in the FX markets. We're going to talk to Jordan Rochester at Nomura. And President Trump won't take part in a public House Judiciary Committee impeachment hearing on Wednesday. We're going to be joined, as we are every Monday, by our global roundtable of reporters and editors to discuss that and the rest of the day's top stories. Join myself and Nathan Hager in a matter of moments for Bloomberg Daybreak Americas.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, John. Well, of course, President Trump is arriving here in the UK, so we'll have the pleasure of watching the Twitter feed with great nerves. John Tucker from Bloomberg Daybreak will be up next. And if you're listening on London DAB Digital Radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance.
Caroline, let's assess the health of the global economy now, shall we? Stephen King, Senior Economic Advisor at HSBC, joins us in studio. Stephen, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
All the way through the Asian session overnight, and this morning we've been gathering together a picture of global growth through the manufacturing PMIs, through just the manufacturing side of the economy, admittedly. But the Chinese data was better than all of the estimates on the Bloomberg. And we also saw the European story sort of stabilising. Is that the way that you would characterise global growth at the moment, stabilising, or do you want to offer up a different assessment?
Well, it's certainly doing better than people might have feared 3 or 4 months back, so that's quite encouraging. But it is worth stressing that some of these numbers are still very, very weak. Germany in particular, even with a reading of 44 on the PMI, that's pretty depressing.
It's convincingly below 50.
Absolutely, yeah. So, it may be that the the sort of rate of change has shifted a little bit, the direction of change may be shifting a little bit, but the actual levels are still, in most cases, quite depressed. Having said that, China is holding up a little bit better, I think, than people had feared. And it's fair to say that China, I guess, over the last couple of years, has probably offered a slightly more stable economic performance than had been the case in the earlier years when people were, persistently far too optimistic about Chinese growth, and things have actually stabilized a bit since then. Having said that, some of the big questions that are out there are still out there. I mean, when you have a sort of flat or inverted yield curve in the US, is that something which you should be worrying about? Is it a sort of a barometer reading indicating that things may be okay currently, but they'll get worse at some point in the future? That question, I think, is still out there. While it remains out there, I think people will remain still quite nervous about the outlook for growth in 2020 and beyond. So, yeah, there's some encouraging news here and there, but I wouldn't get too excited at this stage.
Christine Lagarde, the ECB's new president, speaking at the European Parliament today. I mean, the solution to easy money seems to be more debt. There doesn't seem to be an end in sight for easy money. She will no doubt be grilled about this, and also we are watching for the review that is expected from the ECB to kind of really look at the broad remit. Do you think that changes anything for investors?
Well, in one sense, Christine Lagarde's got a bit of a problem, namely that she hasn't got much in the way of ammunition to use from where we are currently, with interest rates already negative, with QE already being ramped up. What else can she do? So looking at, if you like, the mandate is one way of trying to do something as opposed to doing nothing at all. And of course, there is a criticism of the current mandate, namely that it has a kind of deflationary bias built within it by saying that inflation should be close to but always below 2%. So when you have persistent undershoots, as we have seen in recent times, there's a danger that you end up with inflation which leads to sort of debt deflation kinds of difficulties beginning to come through. But of course, the problem she has is that if you were to end up with, say, a kind of symmetrical inflation target or an inflation band between, say, 1% and 3%, or between, 1.5% and 2.5%, which some people are talking about, you've then got to prove, as the ECB, you have the capability to actually achieve that range. And of course, what we've witnessed in recent times is that inflation has been persistently below that range. So it's all about changing the mandate, but you have to demonstrate you can do something with that new mandate.
It's interesting as the conversation is pivoting away from the detail around monetary policy that you just outlined there, to more airtime at least being dedicated to talking about the fiscal response and whether we'll see that. One of our colleagues, Enda Curran, writing about the global debt story though, and saying we sit on this record debt pile. Is more debt the answer? Of course, you don't have to go into debt to do fiscal spending, but if you haven't got any other way of getting the money, then perhaps that is what happens. What are your thoughts on where we need to see this fiscal impetus and how it should be paid for, Stephen?
Well, we've had sort of a test case already over the last 20 or 30 years, which is Japan. Japan's seen this massive increase in government debt as a share of GDP, and yet Japanese government bond yields are at rock bottom, which tells you that if you've got lots of deleveraging taking place within the private sector and corporate sector, then actually governments can borrow quite a lot more. And it's fair to say that companies have been quite reluctant to invest as much as they might have done in the past. Households are more cautious than they used to be. Bond yields are indeed incredibly low. So there is more room to have higher levels of debt than was the case previously. But there's a separate question as to whether those higher levels of debt translate into reasonable levels of demand. And one of the striking features of Japan is that, yes, there's been lots of fiscal stimulus, much bigger increases in government debt than people had expected. But in terms of the underlying performance of the economy, it's remained quite disappointing. And of course, Japan's got headwinds in the form of demographics, aging population, outsourcing to China, and so on and so forth. And frankly, those kinds of headwinds apply not just to Japan these days, but also to Europe and to a certain degree to the US too.
Yeah, so perhaps pretty worrying on that score. I also want to ask you a question about the UK. Obviously, we're in the midst of the election cycle, and sort of the arguments on the political side are moving towards kind of security. But what about Brexit? Brexit could help to unlock UK investment. This on the CBI this morning. Just a brief view on the economy in Britain and how you view it at the moment.
Well, Britain's one of the countries that's been rather weak in recent months compared with everybody else. Even as others have bottomed out to a certain degree, the UK doesn't look particularly impressive at this stage. Obviously, delivering some kind of Brexit deals with some of the uncertainty that's lingered around over the last 2 or 3 years. But of course, the big question for next year, in the event that Boris Johnson wins the election, it's not given at this stage, but in the event that he does, is what happens to a future UK-EU trade deal. And of course, what he's effectively said is there'll be a deal struck by the end of next year. But a lot of people would say it's near enough impossible to deliver something on that kind of timeline, which just raises the question, will we then drop out on a kind of hard Brexit by the end of 2020 rather than 2019? So I think some of these uncertainties are going to persist for a while longer.
Okay, thanks very much, Stephen. Stephen King, Senior Economic Advisor at HSBC, with us here in our London studio.
Now, next up, Daybreak with Nathan Hager and John Tucker. Or if you're listening on London DAB Digital Radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keane and Francine Lacroix. I'll leave you just with a data check. The US stock 600 up 0.3%. So paring back on some of the gains that we saw earlier. The Zetcha DAX gains 0.5% this morning, and the pound trades at 129.09, so weaker 0.1%. This is Bloomberg.
eBay's Black Friday deals are here.
Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
An Oral-B Smart 5000 toothbrush that was £99 is now only $49.
Blimey, that's good.
Or a Samsung 50-inch 4K TV that was $379 is now only 349 quid.
Stop it, that's amazing.
And with free delivery, it's never been easier. There's still time to shop Black Friday deals on eBay.
Get it!
Limited availability, T's and C's apply.
I love Black Friday. Busy shops, crazy people, average deals. It's so much fun.
Said no one ever. So be savvy and do Black Friday the easy way with Smarty. Grab a huge 100 gig data SIM for just £17 a month on the Mega Plan. And with no credit checks, speed restrictions or contracts tying you down, you can kick back with the best Black Friday deal around. Now that's Smarty. Search Smarty Mobile to find out more, but hurry, as this deal won't be around for long. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Every day it's a little harder.
Disney's Frozen 2.
Anna, Elsa, Kristoff,
Sven. The worldwide phenomenon has returned, captivating critics everywhere.
I believe in you, Elsa, more than anyone or anything.
With big laughs and even bigger songs. Disney's Frozen 2. In cinemas now.
I'll bring the snacks!
Financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Monday, December 2nd, 2019. Coming up this hour.
China responds to U.S. legislation supporting Hong Kong protesters.
Another stumbling block emerges in Phase 1 trade negotiations.
Data out of China points to a pickup in factory sentiment.
And oil gains as OPEC considers another round of output cuts.
President Trump declines to participate in the House impeachment hearing, plus the UN chief warns of a point of no return on climate change. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The Jets beaten by the previously winless Bengals. The Giants no match for the Packers. Losses for the Knicks and Nets.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York. Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 106.1 Boston. Bloomberg 960 San Francisco. Sirius XM 119. And around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
And good morning, I'm John Tucker.
I'm Nathan Hager. Global stocks are gaining as we begin the month of December. It is coming up to 5:01 on Wall Street. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are higher by 11 points. Dow futures up 104. NASDAQ futures a gain of almost 27 points. DAX in Germany up 0.6%. The CAC in Paris is up 0.4%. So is the FTSE in London. 10-year is down 21.30 seconds. The yield 1.84%. 2-year Treasury yield 1.63%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is up 2.5%, up $1.38 to $56.55 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.7% or $10.80 to $14.61.90 an ounce. The euro is at 1.1015 against the dollar. The yen at 109.64. John?
In U.S.-China relations, very much in focus today. The latest development, Beijing sanctioning some American nonprofits and freezing U.S. Navy visits to Hong Kong after President Trump signed a bill supporting protesters in the city. We head to Hong Kong for details now from Bloomberg's Jeff Black.
These look very targeted and fairly moderate, although it might stop a few US warships from harboring in Hong Kong. But what it doesn't do, of course, is something that brings it across into the trade negotiations. It doesn't ask for any further concessions from the US on trade. It doesn't walk away from the table altogether. So it looks like the Phase 1 deal is still on track. At least it hasn't been derailed by this particular incident.
Still, China's foreign ministry is urging the U.S. to stop meddling in Hong Kong affairs and vows to take further actions if necessary.
We have separate developments on trade talks as well. The Global Times, a paper run by China's Communist Party, says tariffs must be rolled back as part of any Phase 1 trade deal with the U.S. Bloomberg's Enda Curran has more from Hong Kong.
China has a red line when it comes to tariffs. They don't just want tariffs to go on pause in terms of any more increases. They want the existing ones rolled back. Whether or not this signal over tariffs is really enough to trip things up, it will be interesting to hear how the US responds. Both governments have been talking about this trade agreement for some time now, but we still don't have any clarity on when or where they might meet to sign off an agreement.
The Global Times says scrapping tariffs scheduled for December 15th won't be enough to seal a deal, and pressuring China to buy U.S. commodities could also threaten an agreement.
In Hong Kong, retail sales suffered a record contraction in October, falling more than 24%. Protests are taking a toll on the economy there and show no sign of slowing after another weekend of unrest. Now, Bloomberg's Stephen Ango reports from Hong Kong.
Protesters set fire to an MTR entrance. There was some tear gas that was fired. There were also some marches and vandalism and more condemnation, I might add, from Beijing, saying they strongly oppose an opinion piece that was published in the local newspaper, the South China Morning Post, by the UN High Commission for Human Rights, who urged for an independent inquiry into police brutality.
Hong Kong's financial secretary says protests will cut growth this year by about 2 percentage points.
Now, despite sanctions on the U.S., division on trade talks, and unrest on Hong Kong, we have upbeat data out of China. PMI readings point to a pickup in factory sentiment, though no strong rebound yet. We get details from Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis.
The Caixin Manufacturing Index rose to 51.8 from October's 51.7. Now, Bloomberg Economics says that the gains might be considered more ephemeral. Gains in unemployment offset weakness in supply and demand. The official PMI jumped over 50 for the first time April. Even there, Bloomberg Economics says, well, it's more a let-up in the declines rather than the end of the downturn. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Brian, thanks. That data helped boost stocks in Asia, with equities in Japan leading gains. Overnight, and Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with details. Juliet, good morning.
Good morning, John and Nathan. The yen fell to a 6-month low while Asian bonds were sold off as equities rose. The Nikkei 225 led the gains across equities, finishing the session higher in Tokyo by 1%. The CSI 300 closed marginally higher in mainland China after the better-than-expected PMI reads. Hong Kong stocks were also well supported despite an expected slump in retail sales for the month of October. Elsewhere, the Kospi rose 0.2% as South Korea's consumer prices returned to growth in November, albeit at a much weaker pace than expected. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sally, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thank you. Oil is gaining today as Iran signals additional production cuts could be coming from OPEC. We get more on that story from Bloomberg's Susanna Palmer.
Iraq says OPEC and its allies will consider deeper production cuts. The country's oil minister told reporters in Baghdad this could be a cut of about 400,000 barrels a day. He also noted that Iraq complied with its commitment to lowering output in November. OPEC Plus had been widely signaling reluctance to cut more, but Iraq is in the throes of political turmoil. OPEC is set to meet in Vienna this week. I'm Susanna Palmer, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Susanna, thanks. And checking prices now, West Texas Intermediate's up 2.5% or $1.40 to $56.56 a barrel. Brent, the international benchmark, up 2.4% or $1.44, trading at $61.93.
Germany also in focus as doubts surface about Angela Merkel's government. The chancellor's coalition partners have elected new leaders who threaten to pull out of their ruling agreement. Bloomberg's Richard Jones has more from Berlin.
The SPD, which is the junior coalition partner in Angela Merkel's government, it could be that they either vote to move out of the coalition outright or that they're going to look for changes to the coalition agreement. And Merkel's party do not want any changes to this agreement. So it could be that this comes to a head. And that actually, I think, in time will weigh on the euro because that'll be a level of political uncertainty in Germany that hasn't been seen in the entire post-reunification era.
Chancellor Merkel's playing hardball, though, telling the SPD there will be no renegotiation of their alliance. Dow futures this morning up 104 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak. And it's now 5:07 on Wall Street. Let's get news from around the world this morning. And we say good morning to Bloomberg's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, John. The latest on the impeachment hearings. But first, more snow is heading our way as winter storm warnings remain in the Tri-County area. Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Carolyn reports.
Michael, the first storm system's gone by, but another storm is going to develop as the upper-level low-pressure system tracks just off to our south. Today, it kind of looks unsettled. We'll see scattered showers inland that may be a little bit of freezing drizzle or even some snow. Then it looks like tonight we'll all see some snowfall. Right now, it looks like about 1 to 3 inches in the city, maybe more across the island, but we'll have to watch it carefully. There will be some places that do a little bit better. Good news is the snow should be over by sunrise. We'll turn partly sunny Tuesday and then remain quiet through the end of the week. Michael?
Thank you very much, Rob. President Donald Trump's lawyer told the House Judiciary Committee the House would not take part in the panel's first impeachment hearing on Wednesday. Attorney Pat Cipollone said the entire process has been unfair to the president. Republican Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana echoed those sentiments on NBC's Meet the Press.
Have they allowed the president to call his own witnesses? No. Have they allowed him to have his lawyer present? No. Have they allowed him to offer rebuttal evidence? No. Have they allowed him to cross-examine the witnesses that were handpicked by Speaker Pelosi? No.
Meet the Press can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio. Kennedy also argued again that Ukraine interfered in the 2016 U.S. election, pushing what U.S. intelligence officials have called a Russian talking point. The House impeachment report will be unveiled today behind closed doors for key lawmakers. Democratic Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, the only House Democrat to have worked on both President Nixon and Clinton impeachment proceedings, told CNN State of the Union that she thinks President Trump's alleged misconduct is worse than that of Nixon.
President Nixon's misconduct related to trying to use the levers of government to hide the Watergate burglary, his misconduct had to do with trying to throw the election. But at least it didn't involving other foreign nations.
President Trump will head to London this week for the NATO meetings as he will continue his call for more countries to pay their fair share. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that the world's efforts to stop climate change have been utterly inadequate so far, and there is a danger global warming could pass the point of no return. He spoke before today's start of a 2-week international climate conference in Madrid. Global news 24 hours a day on the air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Michael, thanks a lot. 5:10 on Wall Street. Time now for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. And we say good morning to John Stashower.
John, Jets fans were giddy. The Jets had won 3 in a row for the first time in 4 years, but the game against 0-11 Cincinnati. Back to reality. The Bengals have been coming closer. They were bound to win sometime. They won easily 22-6. Penalties hurt the Jets. They had 10 for over 100 yards. The Bengals were called for only 2. Jets dropped to 4-8. The Giants have lost 8 in a row at MetLife. Aaron Rodgers, not surprisingly, a whole lot better than rookie Daniel Jones, and the Packers won going away 31-13. 4 touchdown passes for Rodgers, 3 interceptions thrown by Jones.
As a group, we weren't consistent enough, and we didn't, weren't able to score enough. So, I mean, I think that's, that's been the story. We got to be more consistent. We got to find ways to, keep the ball moving forward and get the ball in the end zone when we have chances in the red zone. So, I think we've, it's disappointing, but we gotta stay at it.
Giants' record of the last 3 seasons now 10-34. The 49ers and Patriots are both 10-1. Both lost on the road to AFC first-place teams. The Niners fell in Baltimore on a last-second field goal, 20-17. That's the Ravens' 8th straight win. And last night, a Patriot comeback fell short in Houston, 28-22. New England now just a game ahead of Buffalo in the AFC East, tied with Baltimore atop the AFC, but it's the Ravens who won the tiebreaker. They beat the Pats earlier. At the Garden, Celtics beat the Knicks 113-104. Jason Tatum scored 30. Julius Randle had 26 for the Knicks. At Barclays, much improved Miami rallied past the Nets 109-106. Greg Schiano returning to his old job as the football coach at Rutgers. With a Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashdauer. John?
All right, John, thanks a lot. And just ahead, we'll speak with Jordan Rochester at Nomura International on the FX markets. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's environment of market volatility, Pershing's Prime Services is well positioned to support the needs of hedge funds and other alternative investment managers. Whether it's customized financing or securities lending solutions, platform access, or business expansion, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and agile enough to meet your evolving demands. Pershing helps to solve the needs of clients by advocating for them, providing unwavering strength, deep supply, and award-winning service that is at the core of everything we do. Find out what sets Pershing's prime brokerage team apart.
Learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers offered by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Visit our website at Pershing.com. Pershing LLC, member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Have you wanted to... Just because you travel doesn't mean you can't keep your routine. The more obstacles travel puts between us and our well-being, the more we strive to work well. At Westin Hotels and Resorts, we're focused on empowering your well-being. With Westin meetings, you work and feel your best with nutritious snacks and nourishing smoothies that give you the energy you need to power through any meeting. Don't leave your well-being behind. We give you the choice to get up or to rise. Search Westin online to find out more. Westin, let's rise.
This winter, there's no place like Wicked, the award-winning West End musical. Discover the incredible untold story of the Witches of Oz and how one came to be called good and the other wicked. Wicked at London's Apollo Victoria Theatre. Extra shows added for Christmas.
For the independent bookseller who found you that first edition. For the baker who brings the smell of freshly baked breads to your door.
And for the barista who never needs to ask your name.
We've all got a part to play.
Every little tap keeps your high street alive.
And helps your communities thrive.
So if you love where you live, shop small.
Shopping on your local high street can make a big difference. Shop small. Only by American Express.
On 3, our unlimited data is actually unlimited, like 4 reels. That means you can scroll and scroll and scroll through all the Black Friday deals.
Because we have no speed limits, no data caps, and you'll be 5G ready at no extra cost.
Wow, so many savings.
Our Black now on. Save up to £480. Switch to 3, in-store or online. See 3.co.uk/unlimited-data. Savings on selected phones on 24-month contracts. Ends 5th of December. Terms apply.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Francine Lacroix on Bloomberg Surveillance.
Five Guys is a U.S. restaurant with around 100 stores in the U.K. and big expansion plans. That's despite Brexit uncertainty and difficult market conditions. Well, to talk about all of that and much more, I'm joined by the Five Guys UK Chief Executive, John Uckbert. John, do you ever worry about overexpansion? Do you worry about Brexit impacting your business?
Well, I mean, at this point, it's early days still. We have just opening our 100th store at St. Paul's next week, Monday, and we still think there's actually a lot to go. We think we may be halfway there here in the UK. So it feels like early days for the premium burger segment here in the UK. Of course, Five Guys was founded 30 years ago in America, so there's we're only 6 years in here. So I think it feels like there's a long way to go.
Do you worry about inflation in the UK and the costs that means for actually the things you buy, your food produce?
Sure. Well, cost of goods is a major part of our business, of course, and actually one of the biggest impacts has been the pound versus other currencies. And if you're buying product in non-pound currency and you're earning money in pounds, then of course you have a foreign exchange challenge in addition to inflation associated with it. So both from a currency perspective and from a product inflation perspective, you got to be aware of both.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app. Or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm Nathan Hager. Investors are beginning the month of December in a risk-on mood, boosting stocks after better-than-expected manufacturing readings from China and the Eurozone spurred hope. The global economy is turning a corner. Check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are higher by almost 12 points right now. Dow futures up 108, NASDAQ futures up 30 points. The DAX in Germany up 0.6%. The CAC in Paris and FTSE in London both up 0.4%. The 10-year is down 19.30 seconds. Yield 1.84%. 2-year Treasury yield 1.63%. NYMEX crude oil up 2.4%, up $1.32 to $56.49 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.7%, down $10.40 to $14.6230 an ounce. The euro is at 1.1014 against the dollar, and the yen at 109.63. We're awaiting economic data in the U.S. this morning at 9:45 Wall Street time. We get market U.S. manufacturing PMI. Then at 10, it's ISM manufacturing and construction spending. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. President Trump and his lawyers will not participate in this Wednesday's scheduled impeachment hearing. According to a letter from the White House to the House Judiciary Committee, quote, it remains unclear whether the Judiciary Committee will afford the president a fair process through additional hearings. Meanwhile, key House lawmakers are being allowed a private review of the Intelligence Committee's report on its impeachment inquiry. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, ahead of the International Climate Conference, says that the world's efforts to stop climate change have been utterly inadequate. In the NFL, the Jets and Giants lost. The Redskins won. The Ravens beat the 49ers 20-17. The Patriots and Raiders lost. In the NBA, the Knicks lost to the Celtics 113-104. The Nets lost along with the Wizards and the Warriors. In the NHL, the Bruins won. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Michael, thank you. It's coming up on 5:20 on Wall Street. We're live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Well, the first Monday of the month and a flood of PMI data from around the world. We're joined now by Jordan Rochester, G10 FX strategist at Nomura. And Jordan, I want to start off with those PMI numbers and your impression overall.
Overall, we've got this new narrative. The narrative is green shoots in the data. Is the worst behind us? And that's the big question. A lot of the market pricing and fixed income especially was that we were on the edge of a recession just a few months ago. So all of this news is driving bond yields higher. That's fixed income selling off as the idea of a recession in the near term is dwindling, essentially. We've seen Chinese PMIs pick up. We've seen key European economies such as France, their PMIs have picked up. But it's not yet a broad run of PMIs picking up. There's a few countries such as Sweden that are struggling still, and the UK also, thanks to Brexit and this election concern. But overall, I think the China data and hopefully the US data this afternoon will continue to show the green shoots in the data. And I think next year this will be pretty good for risk. It will be a weaker dollar, and it will see risk appetite pick up over 2020.
Weaker dollar next year. Right now, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're, I think, 9th, 10th day of dollar strength against some of the major currencies. What's holding up the dollar?
Well, like I said, I think we need to actually see these green shoots turn into a full bloom. In terms of the data so far, yes, it's encouraging, but we're yet to have the home run, which is all of the PMIs going above the crucial 50 level. 50 is where firms are actually expanding. A lot of them are still below 50, but they're just recovering from what were low levels in the 40s. When you go above 50, it means that you have an actual expansion, and when you get to that level, hopefully on the flip side of the equation, the US data has not picked up as much as the rest of the world. It's called the dollar smile, and there's three zones of the smile. You've got the two edges, which is where the dollar does well, and at the bottom, that's where the dollar doesn't do so well. And that is pretty much only when the rest of the world is outperforming the US growth. And for the time being, US growth remains stronger than the rest of the world. We just need to see that equation flip, and then the dollar can weaken next year.
Let me pivot right now to the UK elections. The opinion polls that we got over the weekend, it would seem that there's something of a comeback for Labour. What does that do for things, especially for the sterling?
Yeah, we have this chart which is tracking the polls in this campaign and comparing it to the same point in time to the last campaign in 2017. And, you know, at each election, folks think maybe this time it will be different. It looks spookily the same, which is the Conservatives are roughly where they were in 2017, and the Labour Party has momentum behind them. So the polling for the Labour Party has been improving, and we've started to notice undecided voters switching and choosing Labour, and Liberal Democrat voters choosing Labour. What does this mean? It means that actually come the Thursday, the 12th of December, we could again have another hung parliament. If the polling continues at the rate it will be, it won't lead to a majority for the Labour Party. That's a very difficult thing to achieve. But it's now about damage limitation for the Conservatives. And for the markets, if you get another hung parliament, that's not a good thing for the pound. It's not a good thing for UK risk appetite either, because it'll lead to further indecision, very difficult votes in parliament, and it will put into doubt the ability to sign in parliament a new deal with the EU. So we could just see more procrastination again with a hung parliament. Now, if it's a hung parliament with Jeremy Corbyn in number 10, that's a different story, because that leads to a referendum next year. But it also leads to pretty controversial domestic policies when it comes to raising taxes, extra fiscal spending, and nationalizations of key utility industries, which overall, we think that's a big pound lower scenario, because of the uncertainty over domestic policy would outweigh the positive hope from a second referendum down the line.
Hey, can I finish up real quick, just 20 seconds? Where's the volatility in FX markets, and what is that doing for you?
Volatility in the majors, such as Eurodollar and Dollar Yen, they're at their lows. For Eurodollar, at the historical lows. Essentially, it's a snooze fest. And that's because they've been trading that way for quite a while in these very tight ranges. In the G10, the vol remains in the pound, thanks to this election risk and the risk premium around it. And the break-even for owning volatility over the election is around 2 to 3%, which is quite expensive. So essentially, investors are saying, whilst the polls are showing you a conservative majority, it's all very uncertain.
Jordan, always a pleasure. We appreciate it. Jordan Rochester, FX Strategy at Nomura International. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Looks like a higher Wall Street open to kick off December, with the futures all green on the screen. Some better than expected Chinese manufacturing news is boosting the mood. Investors will look for further reasons to be bullish in U.S. factory and employment numbers due out this week, though the lack of progress toward a U.S.-China trade deal could keep a check on sentiment. Today is so-called Cyber Monday, the day when shoppers would traditionally look for online deals on the Monday after Thanksgiving. But these days, consumers aren't waiting for Cyber Monday, and they don't have to, because those promotions and deals start flooding email inboxes days, if not weeks in advance. And consumers logged on and shopped in droves on Black Friday. Adobe Analytics says U.S. online sales hit a record $7.4 billion, the biggest sales day ever, behind last year's Cyber Monday take of $7.9 billion. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients, and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/o.
Where would we be without you? The butchers, the bakers, the digital future makers. From BLTs to MOTs, you're the companies that keep us all going. So mind your business, London. And so will we, with annual reviews to keep you on our best possible tariff. Because deal or no deal, from Downing Street to the High Street, every business is part of something far, far bigger. Find out how HSBC could help you at business.hsbc.uk/mindyourbusiness, based on an annual review of activity for businesses with up to a £2 million turnover.
This winter, there's no place like Wicked, the award-winning West End musical. Discover the incredible untold story of the Witches of Oz and how one came to be called good and the other wicked. Wicked at London's Apollo Victoria Theatre. Extra shows added for Christmas.
I love Black Friday. Busy shops, crazy people, average deals. It's so much fun.
Said no one ever. So be savvy and do Black Friday the easy way with Smarty. Grab a huge 100 gig data SIM for just £17 a month on the Mega Plan. And with no credit checks, speed restrictions or contracts tying you down, you can kick back with the best Black Friday deal around. Now that's Smarty. Search Smarty Mobile to find out more, but hurry, as this deal won't be around for long. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
It's here at Amazon this Christmas. Our Cyber Monday sale has new deals every day. So there'll be more, and more.
Wow, best present ever.
The Amazon Cyber Monday sale, delivering all you need for less. Now on, ends 2nd of December.
Everybody needs somebody. Everybody needs somebody.
This is someone making an online booking at Ford.co.uk using the words Ford20 so they can service their Ford for £20 less. And this is someone who didn't get their Ford serviced. You see, at Ford, we use Ford genuine parts and Ford trained technicians. Plus, if you quote Ford20 when you book with us online, you can receive £20 off. Book now at Ford.co.uk or visit your local participating dealer. Ford service. No one knows your Ford better.
Retail customers only. At participating Ford dealers. Cannot be used with other promotions. T's and C's apply. Search Ford Service for more information.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm John Tucker. We are just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. So let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. Stocks are getting a lift to start the week, despite news that China will sanction some U.S. nonprofits and freeze American Navy visits to Hong Kong. The move in retaliation for President Trump signing a bill supporting protesters in the city. We get more from Bloomberg's Jeff Black in Hong Kong.
It might stop a few U.S. warships from harboring in Hong Kong. But what it doesn't do, of course, is something that brings it across into the trade negotiations. It doesn't ask for any further concessions from the U.S. on trade. It doesn't walk away from the table altogether.
No retaliation on trade is seen as a positive, and upbeat data out of China are also giving a boost to global stocks. Japan led gains in Asia overnight with the Nikkei rising 1%. Right now, S&P futures are higher by 12 points.
Meanwhile, a paper run by China's Communist Party is pushing for more U.S. concessions as part of any Phase 1 trade agreement. Bloomberg FX and rate strategist Richard Jones has more.
We had a tweet from the Global Times over the weekend saying the Chinese government wants tariffs to be rolled back as part of the Phase 1 trade deal with the U.S. So I think the backdrop on trade is the overarching sort of sentiment that's keeping some of the gains outside of Japan limited. But obviously these Chinese PMI data over the weekend were a positive surprise.
And that data show a pickup in China's factory sentiment with the Taishin index rising to 51.8 in November. It is a lift from the prior month, but not a strong rebound. Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie reports from Beijing.
The output component rose sharply, but that was helped by more working days in October and milder than usual weather for this time of year. Now, Bloomberg Economics says, given all of this, we are still likely to see another 0.5 percentage point cut in the one-year rate by the end of the year and more cuts in 2020. In Beijing, I'm Tom McKenzie, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, thanks, Tom. Oil gaining as Iraq signals OPEC and its allies will consider deeper output cuts at this week's meeting. And checking prices right now, Brent is up 2.3%. NYMEX crude is 2.4% higher.
And the holiday shopping season continues today with Cyber Monday. Black Friday set a record with $7.4 billion in online sales. Purchases made by smartphone accounted for $2.9 billion in sales. That, too, is the most ever. S&P futures, as we say, 12 points higher at the moment. Dow futures, a gain of 115 points. NASDAQ futures higher by 31 points. 10-year Treasury down 20-30 seconds. The yield 1.84%. 2-year Treasury yield 1.63%. The euro at 1.1015 against the dollar. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. 5:33 on Wall Street. Time for news from around the world. And we say good morning to Bloomberg's Michael Barr.
John, thank you very much. The House impeachment report on President Donald Trump will be unveiled today behind closed doors for key lawmakers. Democrats are pushing ahead despite the White House's declaration it won't participate in the first hearing by the Judiciary Committee on Wednesday. Republican Congressman Tom McClintock appearing on ABC's This Week.
I think it would be to the president's advantage to have his attorneys there. That is his right. But I can also understand how he is upset at the illegitimate process that we saw unfold in the Intelligence Committee.
ABC's This Week can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio. As millions of people return home after the Thanksgiving holiday, two powerful storms are creating a wintry mess across the nation. Airlines have canceled or delayed thousands of flights across the country. Here in the New York City area, a second round of snow is on the way. Today, New Yorkers are being urged to use mass transit. After a mix of snow and sleet, it will all turn to snow later this evening. For now, we're looking at about... But forecasters are keeping a close eye on the storm. In Albany, more than a foot of snow could fall. Officer Steve Smith is with the Albany Police.
The biggest thing people can do right now as it continues to snow is stay home unless you really have to travel. If you do need to travel, we ask that you turn your headlights on, drive slow, and just really give yourself ample time.
UN Secretary General Antonio Sierra says there is a danger global warming could pass the point of no return. The UN chief said the impact of rising temperatures is already being felt around the world with dramatic consequences for humans and other species. He spoke before the start of today's two-week international climate conference in Madrid. Bloomberg's Laura Milan has more on the conference from Madrid.
Thousands of government delegates, advocacy groups, and company executives will meet for 2 weeks. In this edition of COP25, their goal is to reach an agreement to set up the rules for a global carbon market. That's part of the Paris Agreement goals to reduce emissions and fight climate change.
Bloomberg's Laura Milan from Madrid. The Supreme Court today will hear arguments in a potentially landmark Second Amendment case. At issue is a New York City handgun regulation that put tight limits on licensed gun owners' ability to transport firearms outside the home. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Michael, thank you. Coming up on 5:36 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashower.
John, another rough Sunday for New York football. The Giants lost their 8th game in a row. They had more yards than Green Bay, but the Packers never trailed. Giants were within 4 in the third quarter, but then 2 more Aaron Rodgers touchdown passes. He had 4 on the day, and Green Bay won 31-13, leading Giant coach Pat Shurmur to state the obvious.
I'm always concerned when we don't win, right? And this is another feeling question, I'll feel better when we win games. That's if you're wondering how I feel. I feel a lot better when we win games.
Only team in the NFL with the worst record, the Giants, the Bengals, and they just beat the Jets to improve to 1-11. Wasn't even close in Cincinnati, 22-6. Andy Dalton, the winner in his return as Bengals starting quarterback. The Jets had come in with a 3-game winning streak. Battle of AFC division leaders last night. Houston beat New England 28-22. The Pats offense struggled until late in the game, and they dropped to 10-2, only a game ahead of Buffalo in the AFC East, and AFC North leading Baltimore, also 10-2, owning the tiebreaker with New England. The Ravens on a last-second field goal topped the 49ers 20-17, a possible Super Bowl preview. The Niners also 10-2. Baltimore has won 8 in a row. Knicks and Nets both lost at home. Knicks beaten by the Celtics 113-104 in Miami. Top Brooklyn 109-106. The word last week was that talks had broken off between Rutgers and former football coach Greg Schiano, but they worked it out. Schiano is returning to the job he had for 11 years. The Scarlet Knights have struggled mightily in recent years, but they had relative success under Schiano. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. John?
All right, John, thanks a lot. 5:37 on Wall Street. The latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is on newsstands now with a cover on Google at war, how the company is fighting with employees over doing business with the government. Also in this week's issue, a UK Supreme Court case seeking to hold Barclays responsible for sexual assaults that took place decades ago. Max Abelson wrote the story for Bloomberg Business Week.
These people said that Dr. Bates sexually assaulted them, about 120 of them, and they wanted to hold Barclays responsible because Barclays had sent them to him.
You can read more about this and other stories in this week's edition of Bloomberg Business Week on newsstands now and online at businessweek.com. Terminal customers can subscribe to the magazine at MAG Go and listen to Business Week with Carol Basser and Jason Kelly weekdays at 2 p.m. Wall Street time right here on Bloomberg Radio. And it is now 5:38 on Wall Street. Time now for the Tri-State Business Report. And for that, we're joined live by Bloomberg's Ed Corey. Good morning, Ed.
Morning, John. Hudson Yards, the $25 billion development on Manhattan's far west side, has opened a private club. Wall Street Journal says WS New York, a membership-only space, was created in partnership with Marvin Shanken, publisher and editor of Wine Spectator magazine. Well, the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs is proposing a transfer of $20 million in federal funding to repair Atlantic City infrastructure and public facilities damaged by Superstorm Sandy. NJ Spotlight reports the state identified funding through the newly announced Atlantic City Resilience Program. The merger of New Haven Farms and the New Haven Land Trust is expected to increase their separate programs around nutrition counseling and other programs for kids on Long Island Sound. New Haven Register says the merger takes place January 1st. That's the Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey. John?
All right, Ed, thanks a lot. 5:39 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in now with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Tom Busby, and on WBZ in Boston, I'll be reporting on Cyber Monday sales, forecast to reach nearly $9.5 billion, the most ever.
I'm Gina Cervetti, and on WCCO in Minneapolis, I'm reporting that shares of Target and Best Buy are standouts among local companies in 2019 as we head toward the year's final stretch.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on WHAS in Louisville. Fiat Chrysler clinched a new tentative labor contract with the UAW.
I'm Steve Podoskin on 1010 Wins in New York. We're talking about a survey that finds it takes more than a 40-hour work week to earn a comfortable living anywhere in the tri-state area.
Yeah, those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. Some of the other stories we're watching today, Goldman Sachs will reportedly avoid setting profit targets at next month's Investor Day. According to the Financial Times, Goldman plans to put the focus on its core Wall Street businesses and will announce the launch of a new merchant banking division. And Costco had a rough start to the holiday shopping season. The company's website crashed for more than 16 hours Thanksgiving Day. According to one estimate, that'll cost $11 million in sales. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
So do you really think your party's manifesto is plausible, or is it just an election bribe?
Get an in-depth look at all the main party manifestos. From public services to immigration, the Times and the Sunday Times will guide you through. Pick up your copy today or visit thetimes.co.uk.
On 3, our unlimited data is actually unlimited, like 4 reels. That means you can scroll and scroll and scroll through all the Black Friday deals.
Because we have no speed limits, no data caps, and you'll be 5G ready at no extra cost.
Wow, so many savings.
Our Black Friday deals are now on. Save up to £480. Switch to 3, in-store or online. See 3.co.uk/unlimited-data. Savings on selected phones on 24-month contracts. Ends 5th of December. Terms apply.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
From ESPN and the award-winning producers of The Sterling Affairs comes the latest season of 30 for 30 podcasts. 4 brand new stories of espionage.
He wanted this team to be the Barcelona of women's basketball.
Resilience.
I started to scream. I tried to get away.
Corruption.
It's the culture of win at all costs.
And rebirth.
how will we ever rebuild it?
30 for 30 Podcasts, Season 6. Listen in favorite 30 for 30 podcasts on TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
News 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Winter weather advisories are in effect for the Northeast. Boston is forecast to receive 6 to 8 inches of snow from the system, which began yesterday.
There was a 25-car pileup on Interstate 68 in western Maryland. In Buffalo, New York, a Delta flight landed safely in icy conditions Sunday morning, but it then slid off of an icy taxiway. The temperature had dropped below freezing quickly while it was raining, and while the runways maintained good braking conditions, some tarmacs iced up. I'm Steve Kastenbaum.
President Trump says thanks, but no thanks to testifying in the House impeachment hearings this week.
The White House has made clear no one from there will be involved in the first impeachment hearing Wednesday. President Trump, however, takes note of the Wednesday hearing with this tweet. I will be representing our country in London at NATO while the Democrats are holding the most ridiculous impeachment hearings in history. Hearings scheduled on same dates as NATO.
There's Bob Costantini reporting. I'm John Trout.
Why all the top-tier experts? Because business is not a magic trick.
Give us a sense of the economic backdrop.
Bloomberg Markets.
Which financial records are these?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm Nathan Hager. The month of December is beginning with risk on in effect, with better than expected manufacturing readings for both China and the Eurozone, boosting stocks and hopes that the global economy is turning a corner. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures higher by 11 points, Dow futures up 111, NASDAQ futures a gain of 27 points. The DAX in Germany up 0.7%, CAC in Paris up 0.4%, the FTSE in London up 0.5%. The 10-year is down 20-30 seconds, the yield 1.84%, 2-year Treasury yield 1.64%. NYMEX crude oil up 2.5%, up $1.37 to $56.55 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.7%, down $10.80, $14.62 even an ounce. The euro's at 1.1015 against the dollar, the yen at 109.64. We're awaiting manufacturing data in the U.S. at 9:45 Wall Street time. We get market U.S. manufacturing PMI and ISM manufacturing and construction spending coming at 10. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Key House lawmakers are being allowed a private review today of the Intelligence Committee's report on its impeachment inquiry of President Donald Trump. The review comes as the committee prepares for a vote tomorrow that would send the report to the Judiciary Committee. The White House counsel has turned down an invitation to appear before the panel's first meeting scheduled for Wednesday. Delegates from around 200 countries start 2 weeks of global climate conference meetings in Madrid that seek to step up efforts to stop global warming. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warns current efforts have been utterly inadequate. In the NFL, the Jets and Giants lost. The Redskins won. The Ravens beat the 49ers 2017. The Patriots and Raiders lost. In the NBA, the Knicks lost to the Celtics. The Nets lost along with the Warriors and Wizards. In the NHL, the Bruins won. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
And it is now 5:49 on Wall Street. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion, and we are joined live now by Chris Bryant, Bloomberg Opinion columnist in our Berlin bureau, writing about changes in Germany's auto industry. This comes after Daimler and Volkswagen announced thousands of job cuts last week. And Chris, maybe we start off with a little historical perspective and a comparison of the German auto industry and the U.S. auto industry going back to the last recession.
Yeah, good morning. So, I wanted to point out in the piece I wrote today that the two industries, the German industry and the U.S. industry, had very different experiences last time round. As you're aware, Ford, Chrysler, General Motors slashed tens of thousands of jobs in the years leading up to the recession, a brutal experience. And by contrast, that didn't really happen to the Germans. They got by with some help from government subsidies. They retained their workforces by and large, and then expanded in the years that came after that, helped in part by the boom of Chinese demand for luxury vehicles. But things started to peter out now. So what we're seeing now, arguably, is sort of belated adjustment to the new realities of the car industry, which are essentially twofold. Demand is slowing and costs are rising, in particular spending for electric vehicles.
Why didn't the German auto manufacturers learn anything from the experience of the U.S. manufacturers?
Well, in many respects, the U.S. experience was extremely unenviable and really a torrid time. And it was better in many respects to retain the workforce, in the sense that then they were able to capitalize on the demand that they saw coming. What's really caught them out here, though, is that they were expecting the boom to continue. And it was a bit shocking earlier in the year when Continental, the part supplier, but also Bosch, also a part supplier, essentially said for the next 5 years they see essentially no increase in global car production. And the problem is, if you don't have a top line that's expanding and productivity is improving, then these fixed costs become a real burden, and the costs can be huge. I dug out some details. BMW's labour costs are almost 100,000 euros per employee if you all in salary, pension, and so forth. That's massive. And German car makers are also paying big bonuses to employees. And to be clear, this is all absolutely wonderful. It's great that these companies have been creating so many jobs, but arguably it was inadvisable given the trends we know that are afflicting the industry, which is number one, the shift to electric, which is massively expensive, the billions and billions of euros required to be spent there. And also just simply that, cars aren't the status symbol that they were, and many young people these days don't even see the need to have a license, let alone buy a vehicle.
The investment in electric, there's also no guarantee that's ever going to pay off.
No, and right now, of course, these investments they're making generally aren't paying off, in the sense that the margins from electric vehicles, the few that have launched, probably aren't very big at the moment. The kit that they have to buy is very expensive, and whether consumers are willing to pay for it is unclear. But to be clear as well, the car industry has no choice. In Europe, the emissions regulations are so tough now that unless they bring these cars to market, they simply won't be able to make money, because the fines that would be levelled on any excessive emissions are so high. And in the meantime, of course, the German car industry has to try and cater to all needs. And so other markets, the US, for example, demand will be quite different. And the German car industry, unlike the US, are continuing to try and to be all things to all people. The US car makers essentially just build trucks and SUVs now, until recently anyway. The German car makers are also building a lot of saloons, and demand for those cars, sedan cars, has declined.
Chris, it's a pleasure. Appreciate it. Bloomberg Opinion columnist Chris Bryant joining us from our Berlin bureau. And, of course, you can read more on these and other stories from Bloomberg Opinion at Bloomberg.com/opinion and on the Bloomberg terminal by typing OPIN GO. Nathan.
All right, John, thank you. It's coming up to 5:54 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning with Bloomberg's Joan Doniger.
The Commodity Futures Trading Commission is girding for climate change. The financial regulator has set up an advisory panel to report on climate-related risks to derivatives and other markets. A federal bankruptcy judge doesn't want to see it happen, but he has approved The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's plan to appeal First Energy Solutions Chapter 11 reorganization plan. And Goldman Sachs has settled its share of an antitrust lawsuit that accused some of the world's top banks of rigging the $500 billion market for bonds backed by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Bloomberg Law, everything you need. All on one legal research platform, including guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now to another legal development we're watching. The Supreme Court hearing oral arguments in a gun rights case today for the first time in a decade. 3 New York City residents say the city's restrictions on transporting firearms forced them to stop attending shooting competitions. New York City changed the rules, but the justices refused to dismiss the case. We get more now from Bloomberg's June Grosso and Greg Storr.
Justice Clarence Thomas has called the Second Amendment a constitutional orphan. Will this case change that possibly?
It might. This is the first Second Amendment case the Supreme Court has taken in 10 years. That's part of the reason Justice Thomas has been frustrated. He's wanted the court to take up another case to bolster gun. It is not one of the huge issues that people have been talking about for years, in particular whether someone can carry a gun, a loaded weapon in public, whether that's a constitutional right. It's a much smaller issue, but still gun rights advocates are hopeful it will jumpstart their efforts for broader Second Amendment protections.
This case is so unusual and some might say moot because the strict restrictions on transporting a gun in New York City no longer exist. New York City scrapped them.
They did. People who were on the side of gun control were very worried that this case would be a mechanism for the Supreme Court to expand Second Amendment gun rights. And so they encouraged New York to get rid of its regulations because they thought the court would strike them down and perhaps do some more damage nationwide. The question now is whether there's anything left for the Supreme Court to decide. The city says the residents who are suing in this case have everything they asked for. There's nothing left for the court under the Constitution to resolve.
So, Greg, the justices, if they decide in favor of the gun rights advocates, they can't go too far, can they? Because the case is only about transporting a gun?
They probably can't go too far, but there's always a possibility they can include some language that will be more helpful in a future case. This issue isn't that far removed from the issue of whether you have a constitutional right to carry a weapon with you. That's an issue on which lower courts have divided. So that's certainly an issue where the court could, just with a little sentence, flick at the idea that maybe the Second Amendment does apply outside the home. So far, the court has only said that it applies in the home.
And that's Bloomberg Supreme Court reporter Greg Storr speaking with June Grosso. You can catch more of that interview plus analysis of the latest legal news by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law podcast or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcast. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. S&P futures higher by 11 points right now. Dow futures up 110. NASDAQ futures a gain of 26 points. The 10-year is down 20-30 seconds. Yield 1.84%. 2-year Treasury yield 1.64%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil up 2.6%, up $1.41, $56.59 a barrel. Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg.
eBay's Black Friday deals are here.
Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
A refurbished Dyson V6 Animal that was £159 is now only £129.
Blimey, that's good.
Or a Samsung 50-inch 4K TV that was £379 is now only £349.
Stop it, that's amazing.
And with fast and free delivery, it's never been easier. There's still time to shop Black Friday deals on eBay.
Get it!
Limited availability, T's and C's apply.
On 3, our unlimited data is actually unlimited, like for reals. That means you can scroll and scroll and scroll through all the Black Friday deals.
Because we have no speed limits, no data caps, and you'll be 5G ready at no extra cost.
Wow, so many savings.
Our Black Friday deals are now on. Save up to £480. Switch to 3, in-store or online. See 3.co.uk/unlimited-data. Savings on selected phones on 24-month contracts. Ends 5th of December. Terms apply.
Christmas isn't just about the turkey, you know. At Asda, we've a whole range of delicious joints to bring the family together, like our Butcher's Selection pork loin at just £3.97 per kilo, and our Butcher's Selection beef joint at £4.97 per kilo. So, who's on carving duty? Asda, let's make Christmas extra special. Selected stores subject to availability.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Monday, December 2nd, 2019. Coming up this hour.
China responds to U.S. legislation supporting Hong Kong protesters.
Another stumbling block emerges in Phase 1 trade negotiations.
Data out of China points to a pickup in factory sentiment.
And oil gains as OPEC considers another round of output cuts.
President Trump declines to participate in the House impeachment hearing. Plus, the UN chief warns of a point of no return on climate change. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The Jets beaten by the previously winless Bengals. The Giants no match for the Packers. Losses for the Knicks and Nets.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good Monday morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm John Tucker. Bloomberg Daybreak is being brought to you by Inovalon, a leading provider of cloud-based platforms empowering data-driven healthcare for insurance companies, physicians, pharmacy, and pharmaceutical companies. Inovalon. Data has a story to tell. Inovalon gives it a voice.
And global stocks are gaining to start the week. It is 6:01 on Wall Street. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures higher by 9 points now. Dow futures up 92. NASDAQ futures a gain of 20 points. The DAX in Germany is up 0.7%. The CAC in Paris up 0.3%. 10 years down, 1930 seconds yield 1.84%. The 2-year Treasury yield 1.63%. COMEX gold down 0.7%, down $9.70 to $14.63 even an ounce. The euro at 1.1012 against the dollar. The yen 109.64. John?
Well, we have several developments on the U.S.-China relations to get to, but first, let's get you up to date on the winter weather advisor that's gripping much of the Northeast today. And for that, we bring in Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael.
Thank you very much, John. In the New York area, there will be a mix of snow and sleet today before it all turns to snow by this evening. Around 3 inches could fall, but the evening commute won't be pretty. Meanwhile, New Englanders are riding out the first early winter storm of the season. Some parts of Massachusetts could see up to 18 inches of snow by tomorrow morning. For now, Boston schools are open today. In the Washington, D.C. area, it will be a rain event for the most part today. This evening, there could be a snow shower. Michael Barr, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Okay, Michael, thanks. The U.S.-China relations, as John said, very much in focus this morning. The latest development, Beijing sanctioning some American nonprofits and freezing U.S. Navy visits to Hong Kong after President Trump signed a bill supporting protesters in the city. We head to Hong Kong for details now from Bloomberg's Jeff Black.
These look very targeted and fairly moderate, although it might stop a few U.S. warships from harboring in Hong Kong. But what it doesn't do, of course, is something that brings it across into the trade negotiations. It doesn't ask for any further concessions from the U.S. on trade. It doesn't walk away from the table altogether. So it looks like the Phase 1 deal is still on track. At least it hasn't been derailed by this particular incident.
Still, China's foreign ministry is urging the U.S. to stop meddling in Hong Kong affairs and vows to take further actions if necessary.
And we have separate developments on trade talks as well. The Global Times, a paper run by China's Communist Party, says tariffs must be rolled back as part of any Phase 1 trade deal with the U.S. Now, Bloomberg's Enda Curran has more from Hong Kong.
China has a red line when it comes to tariffs. They don't just want tariffs to go on pause in terms of any more increases. They want the existing ones rolled back. Whether or not this signal over tariffs is really enough to trip things up, it will be interesting to hear how the US responds. Both governments have been talking about this trade agreement for some time now, but we still don't have any clarity on when or where they might meet to sign off an agreement.
The Global Times says scrapping tariffs scheduled for December 15th won't be enough to seal a deal, and pressuring China to buy U.S. commodities could also threaten an agreement.
In Hong Kong, retail sales suffered a record contraction in October, falling more than 24%. Protests are taking a toll on the economy and show no sign of slowing after another weekend of unrest. Bloomberg's Stephen Engel reports from Hong Kong.
Protesters set fire to an MTR entrance. There was some tear gas that was fired. There were also some marches and vandalism and more condemnation, I might add, from Beijing, saying they strongly oppose an opinion piece that was published in the local newspaper, the South China Morning Post, by the UN High Commission for Human Rights, who urged for an independent inquiry into police brutality.
Hong Kong's financial secretary says protests will cut growth this year by about 2 percentage points.
And despite sanctions of the U.S., division on trade talks, and unrest on Hong Kong, we have upbeat data out of China. PMI readings point to a pickup in factory sentiment, though no strong rebound yet. We get details from Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis.
The Caixin Manufacturing Index rose to 51.8 from October's 51.7. Now, Bloomberg Economics says that the gains might be considered more ephemeral. Gains in unemployment offset weakness in supply and demand. The official PMI jumped over 50 for the first time since April. Even there, Bloomberg Economics says, well, it's more a let-up in the declines rather than the end of the downturn. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Brian, thanks. That data helped boost stocks in Asia, with equities in Japan leading gains overnight. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with details. Juliet, good morning.
Good morning, John and Nathan. The yen fell to a 6-month low while Asian bonds were sold off as equities rose. The Nikkei 225 led the gains across equities, finishing the session higher in Tokyo by 1%. The CSI 300 closed marginally higher in mainland China after the better-than-expected PMI reads. Hong Kong stocks were also well supported despite an expected slump in retail sales for the month of October. Elsewhere, the Kospi rose 0.2% as South Korea's consumer prices returned to growth in November, albeit at a much weaker pace than expected. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sarli, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Juliet, thanks. We have this headline crossing the Bloomberg right now. President Trump will restore tariffs on steel shipped from Brazil and Argentina. In Twitter this morning, the president says, quote, Brazil and Argentina have been presiding over a massive devaluation of their currencies, which is not good for our farmers. Therefore, effective immediately, I will restore the tariffs on all steel and aluminum that is shipped to the U.S. from those countries.
And we're continuing to watch oil. It's gaining this morning as Iraq signals additional production cuts could be coming from OPEC. Ministers meet this week. Checking prices now, West Texas Intermediate's up 2.3% or $1.28 to $56.45 a barrel, while Brent, the international benchmark, is up 2.3% or $1.40 to $61.89 a barrel. S&P futures are higher by 9 points. Dow futures up 91. NASDAQ futures up